Agenda before us is opening and welcome, adoption, apologies, presentation by the department on the APPs, discussions, and closure. Do we have a mover for adoption of the agenda?
I move, Honorable Douglas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Douglas. Do we have a seconder?
Honorable Nalumango, seconds.
Bayadangi, thank you very much. Honorable Member, now that the agenda is adopted, Lubabalo, can we have apologies?
Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. The first apology is from the Minister. He's attending cabinet meeting. Deputy Minister Moraka will be leading the department, assisted by Ms. Baloy, who will lead the delegation, the presentation for DECO, and Ms. Sempo will lead the presentation for the ARF. Deputy Minister Portas is also not able to attend. He's attending another meeting, Chair. And Dr. Litchfield, yes, okay. I cannot share. Those were the only apologies. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Deputy Minister, we take this opportunity, Deputy Minister Moraka, to welcome you. We also welcome the revocrats and the bureaucrats from DERCO who are accompanying you here today to do an accounting to the people of South Africa via the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperation. We know that happenings and developments at the Strait of Hormuz continue to impact negatively on global supply chains, which are also impacting here in South Africa. Yesterday night, we have seen the price of fuel reaching historical levels, and we welcome the gesture by government to try and cushion the people of South Africa in as far as the fuel levy is concerned. We hope that it will be something that from time to time government will look at so that we try and reduce the burden on our people, because electricity has also gone high. Fuel has gone high, and it's affecting also the prices of food and many other things, machinery that people buy and so on, all because of the Strait of Hormuz. And the Strait of Hormuz, which is a consequence of the actions that emanated from the United States of America, accompanied by Israel or in aiding Israel, together embarking on an onslaught against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The build-up started, as we all know, since President Trump came into office as the President of the United States of America, accelerated by also the action of the disappearance of the President of Venezuela, who today we don't know his whereabouts, together with the wife. We wish them well wherever they are. We hope they are still alive wherever they are, and that they are being taken care of. Future developments will indicate what actually happened to both President Maduro and the wife. We are welcoming you again, Deputy Minister. We saw yesterday that you met with President Chapo in Pretoria on behalf of the rest of us, mandated by President Ramaphosa to prosecute that responsibility of strengthening political and economic relations between the two countries. So we want to commend and congratulate the department for that successful engagement, which followed after the successful engagement which took place also between yourselves, the Deputy President, and the Chinese delegation, which was here in Cape Town last month. I think we must also salute the government of China under President Xi Jinping for ensuring that they do away with all the tariffs in as far as trade is concerned for the rest of the African continent. The only area which has been left out, as we all know, is Eswatini, for reasons that we all know that relate to something that we've always dealt with here in the Portfolio Committee. The Public Finance Management Act imposes a responsibility on the executive arm of the state. In this instance, it will be Department of International Relations and Cooperation on a regular basis, once a year, to come and present processes that will culminate into the adoption by Parliament of the budget of the department, and ultimately the allocation, which will then enable the department to use some money so that it can execute its responsibilities. That is where we are today. That process is commencing here today. I'm therefore giving over to you, Deputy Minister Moraka, to lead your forces to do the presentation, after which we will then have a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and good morning to your good self, and also morning to the rest of the honorable members who have joined us in this Portfolio Committee meeting, and also the team from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation that is hereby led by the Director General, Mr. Zain Dango, and the rest of Team DERCO that is joining him. We want to also convey our warmest greetings to the members of our South African citizens who are joining these proceedings from the Parliament streaming forums, where we are now streamed live to the population of the people of South Africa in general. And ladies and gentlemen, indeed, Honorable Chairperson, it is indeed an opportunity for us to extend our warmest greetings to all our distinguished members and participants at this meeting of the Portfolio Committee, which has commenced with the sole purpose of considering the department's annual performance plan for the financial year 2026-2027, and also considering the planned APP as well for the ARF that talks to our strategic priority areas that we have set aside for this specific financial year of 2026-2027. Indeed, as we are all aware, honorable members, that all government departments, including all state entities, are required by the law of the Republic of South Africa to develop their 2026-2027 annual performance plans. And this Department of International Relations and Cooperation must as well do as expected by the Constitution, as we are well aware that our Constitution is the supreme law of our country, and we need to therefore abide by those constitutional prescripts that always prescribe that an APP, together with the strategic framework of the department, must therefore be tabled to Parliament for consideration, including a process where we need to demonstrate the alignment of the work that we are going to be doing with a specific strategic plan that must therefore outline our seventh administration's priority areas as they are enshrined in our medium-term development plan for 2030. I think, Chairperson, this coherence continues to ensure that the department's strategy remains both relevant and effective in guiding the execution of South Africa's foreign policy. How do we do that as the Department of International Relations in making sure that we continue to champion our foreign policy and also champion our national interest amidst this ever-changing global balance of forces? We ought to therefore work in a strategic manner to align our foreign policy position with our national interest as a country. Because when you observe what is happening, like you have rightfully alluded to it, Honorable Chairperson, we characterize the geopolitical developments in the world as the ones that are really making it impossible for us to continue to ignore these developments and these realities that the entire global community continues to be faced with. We wake up in a world that is in turmoil as we continue to characterize it because of this ever-changing global balance of forces. So how do we then work together with the Portfolio Committee in positioning the interest of our nation, the South African government, amidst those ever-changing global balance of forces? I want to indicate hereby, Chairperson, that the 2026-2027 Annual Performance Plan is crafted to ensure that the Department of International Relations and Cooperation continues to fulfill its vision, mission, and also the foreign policy priority outcomes must always be finding expression in our plans for this financial year. The plan continues to serve as a roadmap that reinforces our strategic orientation as we continue to advance South Africa's foreign policy that is Africa-centric, and also its national interest must always put the interest of the people of South Africa on top of our agenda of our foreign policy. In doing so, Honorable Chair and members, we are therefore reassured that we will reaffirm our commitment to the realization of a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world through the dedication efforts of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, working closely with our missions abroad, because you know that we continue to have our embassies that continues to render consular services to the South Africans that are living and also working abroad. Honorable Chairperson, the execution of the department's mandate continues to face significant challenges arising from both internal and external environments. Since the year 1994, South Africa has cultivated durable diplomatic and political relations with partner countries both on the continent of Africa and in other regions that we continue to enjoy those diplomatic ties with. This approach has translated into a sustainable diplomatic engagement that has generated high level of political trust and a goodwill that continues to enhance South Africa's standing as a credible and a principled state, wherein we need to continue with our bilateral relationship with those progressive countries in order for us to champion our national interest and also champion our foreign policy. I think additionally, Chairperson, we also operate within a fluid and a contested world order marked by competing national interests that are polarized and also increasing the issue of the increasing use of cohesive measures by developed and powerful nations against those countries that are still developing. And I think it's an issue that we need to pay a close attention to, because those that are developed economically continues to suppress those that are developing, especially the countries of the global south, because we ought to work together in making sure that we drive certain reforms that can enable our developing nations to also arrive at that level of being categorized as developed economies. These dynamics, however, Chairperson, continue to compel South Africa to remain present, visible, and also active within the global system of governance, both at a bilateral and multilateral level, in pursuit of the advancement of South Africa's foreign policy agenda and the national interest objectives. Internally, Chairperson, the department is also confronted with issues of resource constraints that I believe we are not presenting it to your good selves for the first time, especially in the areas where administration ought to be fully funded so that it can be able to execute its mandate. We need to work together with the portfolio committee in making sure that the allocation of resources within the entire government spectrum ought to look at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation differently as we continue to advocate for more resource allocation so that we can be able to render quality services in line with our Foreign Service Act. I need to indicate that, Chairperson, when we come to the presentation, all these issues will be clearly outlined where we have limited resources that are really hampering our work. And I need to indicate as well that ongoing engagements between the Department of International Relations and the Ministry of Treasury, the Department of Treasury in our South African government, continues to look at these issues constantly, to a point that we are starting to find each other, because even when you look at the current budget allocation, there is no increment except for the previous increment that we had observed as a result of our hosting of our presidency of the G20 as a country. That is the only reason where we saw the increment of our budget as a department as compared to the other financial years that have passed previously. Chairperson, on issues of the African Renaissance and International Cooperation Fund, we must then continue to be using this ARF as an instrument that must support South Africa's foreign policy in line with our foreign policy and our ARF activities. We must therefore remain using these tools as an important tool that must seek to enhance our development assistance and cooperation within a dedicated focus on the realization of the African agenda, where we need to work towards silencing the guns and making sure that we build the Africa that we want. The following key strategic objectives of the ARLs continue to serve as the basis for our key targets that are set out in our financial year for the year 2026-2027. We aim to be promoting issues of democracy and good governance within the continent of Africa. Secondly, Honorable Chairperson, we need to be using ARF to prevent any conflict that might arise in the continent, and also utilize these limited resources and deal with issues of resolving ongoing conflict that continues to affect our African member states. Thirdly, we need to work together in making sure that the socio-economic development and the regional economic integration of the continent of Africa, inclusive of that one of the Southern African Development Community, because South Africa continues to participate within SADC region. How do we then utilize ARF resources to make it a point that we advance issues of regional economic integration within our region of SADC and the continent as a whole? We must also utilize ARF to deal with issues of humanitarian assistance and human resource development in those countries that are faced with ongoing conflicts. Here I'm referring to the situation that is happening in Sudan, what is happening in the Sahel region, and also looking closely to the situation that is happening in the Eastern DRC and other parts of the continent where conflict continues to raise their ugly heads. How do we then utilize these limited resources that are within ARF and make it a point that we address all these 4 key strategic objectives for this financial year? I think, Chairperson, it is in this strategic period where the entity will prioritize the process of identifying projects that needs to be supported by ARF so that we deal with issues of socio-economic integration and the provision of humanitarian assistance to those countries that are critically in need of this kind of assistance. And I need to indicate that South Africa has always been with those oppressed members of our continent, and we have always utilized ARF to demonstrate our solidarity with those countries, including those that are I've already mentioned, and even in Madagascar, in the developments that are happening there, Honorable Chairperson, who are directly involved, of course, utilizing these limited resources. I need to also indicate to your good selves, honorable members, that the fund of ARF will continue to support peacekeeping missions for African countries by availing these resources in line with the ARF Act by ensuring that conflicts are prevented from raising their ugly heads, as opposed to a process of always trying to respond to the ongoing conflicts. We need to now start to move towards making sure that we prevent this conflict from rising their ugly heads. Of course, we need to utilize all those diplomatic channels that are available for us to do that. Chairperson and members, the presentation that will be made today by our technical team that is led by our Director General will therefore provide an insight on the planned performance targets for ARF for the financial year 2026-27, and also linking it to the available financial resources that I've already indicated to your good selves, that we continue to operate within limited resources, but we are not lowering our guard in that regard. We're trying our level best to utilize these little resources effectively and also to the best interest of the people of the continent of Africa and our population here in South Africa as a whole. Honorable Chair and members, as I conclude my remarks, I need to indicate that it is our sincere expectation that today's engagement has provided meaningful insight into the work of the department and the ARF as a whole. we reaffirm our unwavering commitment to advancing South Africa's national interests and also strengthening our strategic partnerships and also upholding the highest standards of accountability and transparency that we continue to do every time when we appear before this August Portfolio Committee. It is in this regard that we remain focused on ensuring that our collective efforts must translate into measurable and tangible outcomes, not only for South Africans, but for the people of the continent as a whole and the broader global community. Through the Director General, who is here, I've already seen him, and the rest of the team, where Ms. Baloyi, together with the CFO, will then present on behalf of the department our planned strategic focus for the financial year and our annual performance plan, as I've already alluded to. We are looking forward to our fruitful engagements with the members of the Portfolio Committee so that we can end this meeting with the clear directives that must then indicate to us as to how do we then move forward and address all these issues that the chairperson has alluded to when he opened his meeting, that the fuel prices continue to be skyrocketing to a point that even the high cost of living is starting to be felt by the ordinary South Africans on the ground as a result of the issue that is ongoing within the Gulf countries, where the US and Israeli aggression to the Islamic Republic of Iran continues to raise its ugly head to a point that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz makes it difficult for us to manage and control these ongoing fuel prices. How do we then work together to safeguard the South African economy from entering into a recession that must then affect our economy in a negative way? We must also appreciate the zero tariff regime that has been extended to all African countries that have got diplomatic relationship with the People's Republic of China. That has officially commenced on the 1st of May this year, 2026. And I believe what the People's Republic of China has done under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, it will then serve as a strategic way to make it a point that the continent as a whole continue to have a trading partnership with the People's Republic of China so that we can be able to grow our economies without any hesitation. I need to thank you, Chairperson, kindly for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to our fruitful engagements, and the team is ready to take us through the presentation of the APP for the year 2026-2027 and our strategic development plan for the ARF as we continue with the engagements. Over to the team that is led by DG, if the chair can allow me to do that. Thank you very much.
For those opening remarks, because we are going to be together until 2029, I will ensure in future that I give you 10 minutes to do opening remarks. So it's not your problem. It's me who did not say for how long you need to be laying the foundation for the presentation. So thanks very much for that informative presentation. DG, Ntate Tango.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members. As indicated by the Deputy Minister, we will kick off with the presentations immediately. Ms. Baloyi, our COO, will be doing the presentation on the department, and followed by Ms. Semper, who will do the presentation on the ARF, and the CFO is also with us to do the presentation on the finances. So with your permission, if we can hand over directly to Ms. Baloy and her team, thank you.
Thank you, DG, and good morning to the chairperson and the members of the portfolio committee. We have agreed that today the presentation will be done by the Chief Director, Planning and Evaluation, Ms. Musa. I will then just hand over to her, and then after it will be the CFO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baloy. Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members of the committee, dear Moraka, DG, and colleagues. Our presentation today outlines our policy priorities, strategic objectives, and the key performance targets for the medium term, including as we continue to advance South Africa's foreign policy in a rapidly evolving global environment. The Deputy Minister has alluded to our foreign policy priorities, so the presentation will focus merely on the targets and as well as the expectations for the 26-27 year, as well as the strategic plan. On slide 3 of the presentation, DIRCO has reviewed its strategic plan, which was tabled in April 2025. The strategic plan remains unchanged as presented in the previous financial year, as there have been no significant policy shifts or changes in the service delivery environment. Plans, the processes that we have undertaken to present the DIRCO APP 26-27 commenced in 2025 July, where we have engaged extensively with stakeholders within the department as well as external, and taking the MTDP into consideration, we have then finalized the annual performance plan 26-27, tabled on March 30th this year. Going straight into the strategic plan slides on slide 13, DIRCO strategic outcomes. This has been linked to priority 1 and priority 3 of the MTDP. Priority 1 being drive inclusive growth and job creation, and priority 3, a capable, ethical, and developmental state. So under the 2 priorities, we have prioritized the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area to increase South Africa's exports to the rest of the continent. And we have strengthened economic diplomacy with the country's largest trading partners and potential trading partners, as outlined in the MTDP. On slide 15, as the MTDP reflects, we have used South Africa's presidency of the G20 to tackle global inequality and poverty and advance sustainable development. We will be promoting peace, security, democracy, and socioeconomic development in SADC and other parts of the continent, strengthening peace and security and the governance architecture. On slide 16, we present a linking between the Statement of Intent, the NDP, the Agenda 2063, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. These documents have been taken into consideration during our planning processes, both with the development of the inputs to the MTDP, as well as the strategic plan and the APP. Delving straight into the strategic plan on slide 18, the first strategic outcome reflects our administrative target, which is a modern, effective department with capable and skilled employees committed to the excellent execution of South Africa's foreign policy. And here we reflect our IT processes. We have realized that we have been struggling to some extent with IT and automation of processes in this department, and thus this remains a target in our strategic plan. Under Program 2 on slide 19, we have leveraged bilateral economic relations to achieve the objectives of the NDP and the MTDP priorities. Here we have targeted the 300 structured bilateral mechanisms, high level and other engagements on political, economic, and social relations. On to strategic outcome 3, which reflects our economic diplomacy targets. And over the medium term, we have targeted 300 economic diplomacy engagements, as well as 100 engagements to facilitate development finance institutions. Under Program 4, with domestic and foreign audiences informed in South Africa's foreign policy, on slide 23, we have the 400 key messages, the 60 public participation programs, as well as the 60 opinion pieces. And last on the strategic plan is Strategic Outcome 7, which refers to the strengthening of multilateralism. And here we reflect the membership fees paid throughout the financial year. This is linked to a capable, ethical, and developmental state on the MTDP. That brings me to the end of the strategic plan, and we can now briefly go through the annual performance plan as reflected in the tabled documents on slide 26. Slide 26 and 27 reflect the Program 1 outputs and targets. And a key for us here is to ensure that we strive towards a clean audit, as well as ensuring that our business processes are automated as reflected in our strategic plan. On slide 28, we reflect Program 1's the administrative targets as they reflect per quarter. That's as per quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have reflected on the timeframes for the delivery of the targets, and these will be presented on a quarterly basis to the portfolio committee. On slide 29, we reflect the bilateral relations. Here we have to acknowledge that we taken into consideration the bilateral relations, as well as the structured bilateral mechanisms, as well as the high-level engagements and the economic diplomacy targets to be achieved under Program 2. What we must acknowledge here is, in previous years, we had received budget so that our missions were able to host events, were able to invite stakeholders to events. But as of recent, in the last 2 years to now, we realized that this is no longer done at missions. Instead, our missions capitalize on engagements and events that are hosted by the host country or other stakeholders within the environment. And regional integration, we have the targets that are linked to the strategic plan on slide 30, and this is the SADC statutory, sectoral, and senior officials meeting, as well as the SACU meetings. These targets are also reflected in the medium-term development plan. On slide 31, we provide a time frame for these targets and with respect to the quarters in which they will be achieved. Under Program 3, we have concluded with the hosting of the G20 in the previous financial year, but we remain with the targets as we have set out in the strategic plan, which is the summits at the high-level summits, and this includes BRICS as well as the United Nations General Assembly. Included in Program 3, we have both qualitative as well as quantitative reporting, and the issues that are reported for impact here reflect on peace and security, human rights, and economic and social development. Program 3.3 and 3.4 on slide 33 reflect on the South-South engagements as well as the North-South engagements. Here, the qualitative reporting is provided through the reporting of our multilateral components. Slide 34 reflects on the quarterly targets, providing a time frame for the delivery of these targets. Under slide 35, we have Program 4. Here, we're reflecting on the work of our public diplomacy as well as our service delivery environment, which is state protocol and consular services. We have targeted the public participation programs as well as our opinion pieces drafted by officials in the department. And under the state protocol section, we are reflecting on consular services that are rendered, as well as the legalized services that we render. These targets are responsive targets, as they are based on the responses received. Under slide 36, which brings me to the end of the presentation on performance information. Here we are looking at the payment of transfers and the membership contributions to organizations paid throughout the year. And this is also a responsive target as reflected and has been reported on for the last 10 years in the department. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tlengiwe Bengo. I'll take you through the 2026-27 budget allocation of the department, which is slide 38. Thank you. In terms of the numbers, as you could see on the slide there, we tried to compare what was allocated in 2025-2026 with what is allocated now in 2026-2027. As the numbers indicate on the slide, there is a slight increase from 2026-2027 financial year, which is 7.2 billion, to 2025-26 financial year, which is just 7 billion. When we look at the economic classification, the increase is noticeable under compensation of employees, which is basically to cover the cost of living adjustment that DPSA normally implements on a yearly basis. Goods and services, you will notice that from the budget of 2.5 billion in the previous financial year, the department has been allocated 2.4 billion. The reduction is as a result of the additional budget that was allocated to the department in 2025-26 in relations to G20 activities. Then the interest and rent on land has slightly gone up due to CPI. And then the transfers and subsidies have gone up as well due to adjustments that normally applied by the international organization, looking at the exchange rates and also looking at other commodities. Now, also, when you look at payment for capital assets, there is a slight increase as well from 185 million to 210 million in the current financial year, which then is appreciated. So what I was explaining is contained in slide number 39, where I just want to again emphasize that the increase of approximately 2% in the budget of 2025-26 is what has been experienced by the department, and also that the COE still remains a challenge, even though there is an increase of about 100 million. However, that 100 million will then cover the exchange rate fluctuation as well as the cost of living adjustment that has been implemented based on the PSA resolution. And we are continuing to engage with National Treasury to address the department's budget pressures. But in the meantime, we are prioritizing activities as per the budget allocated to the department. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, and thank you, DG. Greetings to the Honorable Chair and the Honorable members. This morning, we will be taking the committee through the annual performance plan of the ARF for 26-27, which is developed based on our strategic plan which remains unchanged and which is aligned to the medium-term development plan. On slide 2, in slide 2 outlines the components which our presentation will follow, but I would like to just dive into the slide number 4, where we are highlighting our key focus for this financial year. And we want to bring it to the attention of the committee that ARF will continue to be utilized as a tool to support foreign policy objectives. And this will be done by enhancing cooperation and development on the African continent and other countries. And in this financial year, what we seek to do, we seek to respond to humanitarian assistance crisis. We also seek to support initiatives to promote regional integration through projects which will enhance economic trade and cultural diplomacy by upholding the principles of Ubuntu and fostering relations with African countries. And lastly, we also want to advance our efforts to support democracy and good governance, as we have identified this as one of the crucial pillars for an ethical and a capable state. Then in slide 5, we emphasize on our impact as the ARF and our impact statement, which is to contribute towards the development of a better Africa and a better world by enhancing cooperation cooperation between South Africa and other countries. But mainly in this financial year, we're coming to draw attention and more focus particularly to African countries. Honorable members, then when we move into slide 6, now we are unpacking our outcomes. In slide 6, we are presenting our key performance target. We have structured our APP into 2 programs. Program 1, which is project administration. With ARF, it is a project-related entity, therefore our APP is only on project-related matters. But however, project for administration, it relates to where we are measuring our efficiency on our project management processes, on how we manage active projects, and the oversight that is provided by the ARF Advisory Committee, which is a committee which provides oversight and strategic direction for the fund. And the second program will be project funding. Under this program, we are mainly unpacking the projects, the new applications which will be funded. And out of this APP, we added to say our targets, we have planned for 17 targets. And in this planning process, we have adopted a risk-based approach, as the committee might be aware that ARF is a responsive tool. So we had to take into account and incorporate the risks that may hinder us in achieving our objectives. But in doing so, we'd like to say we've also adopted and developed mitigation strategies on how we're going to respond to those risks. And we have also lastly incorporated our baseline. We have looked into our achievements for 25-26, and that has assisted us in ensuring that the targets that we bring forth for 26-27 are also achievable and are linked to the timelines that are declared. Under Program 1, just to highlight some of the key targets which we have planned for, we have planned for 100% of the requests for fundings which will be evaluated by the advisory committee. And we have also planned for more site visits on active projects. This indicator and target will assist us by ensuring that where projects are funded, the ARF team is on the ground to verify the existence of the project, but furthermore to also ensure that the funding is spent for what it was intended to, and engage with the recipients and the relevant countries to ensure that post this funding, there is sustainability on continuation on the work that the ARF has started. And lastly is to highlight our responsibility regarding the reporting which affect the audit outcomes. So we are committing in this financial year that we will prepare reports quarterly that are adequate and that are supported by evidence to align to the work that has been carried out and performed for all our active projects. Then on slide 7, we are unpacking now project funding. This project funding, it draws momentum from the strategic priorities for South Africa, but mainly dependable on the budget availability. What I mean by that is that the projects that are funded will be highly attributable to how much money the ARF has as a fund. Therefore, firstly, we are planning to support organizations with initiatives to promote democracy and good governance. And in this target, we are measuring the efficiency of the advisory committee to say they will provide recommendations to both the Minister of DERCO and the Minister of Finance timely. And lastly, then we also measuring the support by the ministers, which will lead to the approval of the project. And we also still committing to support the SADC election observer mission for 26-27. The only country that we have scoped in due to the election plan is the Zambia, which will be in August. Therefore, the ARF will be supporting this initiative by funding the observers who will be going to observe the elections. On slide 8, we now drawing our attention into prevention and resolution of conflict, as alluded by the Deputy Minister in her opening remarks. The ARF will continue to support initiatives for mediation and support. And as a result, for this indicator, we have a pre-approved budget allocation, which will be used as a drawdown. Therefore, what it means is that all the project proposals that we'll be receiving for the countries will be submitted to the advisory committee for their recommendation, and the concurrence for this has been ring-fenced. Once the recommendation has been granted, then the resolution and mediation process will then be initiated timely to achieve a more peaceful Africa for all. Then on slide 9, we have humanitarian assistance. In this program, we are responding to natural disasters across the continent, and we also supporting initiatives to rebuild for these countries. Our spending, if the committee might recall, from the previous years confirmed that this program is significant in terms of the amount spent, and it is also high in terms of impacts as it directly affects the livelihoods. It is on this basis that we are planning to support 100% of the humanitarian assistance projects that will be submitted, and this will be linked to the funding aspect. But however, in that we will align the proposals that are submitted in line with the processes and compliance requirements in terms of the ARF Act. And once this is achieved, then the project will be approved and highly dependable on the budget, and it will move into the initiation stage, implementation, and project closure. Then we moving into the next slide, we also planning to utilize our diplomatic training academy for capacity building and training initiatives. In doing so, we are trying to equip particularly mostly our African countries with the technical skills in diplomacy. And we are also lastly drawing attention to socioeconomic development. Under this, we are saying that the plan is to fund initiatives which will support exports for South Africa and will also give exposure to our South African companies to enhance trade in the international spaces. This is one of the key indicators that is quite crucial in this financial year, and the committee will see when I get into the financial resources, it will also align in terms of the spending, because we have realized that the projects for socioeconomic development, they confirm sustainability and they also confirm the flow of the economic benefits back into the South African market. And then lastly, I will touch into the resource consideration. For the 26-27, we have an annual allocation of 56 million, and we have anticipated to accrue interest income of 1 million. But the committee will then note that moving from the 25-26, our increase in the annual allocation is an average of 3%. But however, we're also incorporating that post-July, we will initiate discussions with National Treasury on retention of surplus, so that we can have more funds as a fund and be able to commit and assist more countries. And we have then split this amount in terms of our objectives. We have split for democracy and good governance, but also I want to just throw emphasis on the socio-economic development. Therefore, the first time in this medium-term period, we are coming to say we have committed more funding towards this objective, because it is during this stage where we are intentional with supporting economic diplomacy. We are also intentional on upskilling our South African companies in terms of the skill and giving that exposure for them to trade in the international spaces. So honorable members and honorable chair, this is the annual performance plan of the ARF I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Back to you. That concludes the presentations.
Thanks, DG. Any amplification, Deputy Minister?
No, I'm covered, Chair, and my apologies for having taken more than 10 minutes earlier. Thank you.
Don't worry, it's in the length, it's a protracted struggle. 2029, all things being equal, we'll still be together until then. People who speak Latin, they say that all things being equal, it's what do they call it? Who is a lawyer here? Okay, I forgot the name, but it's all things being equal. Ceteris paribus, Deputy Minister, all things being equal. Honorable members, we have now reached a stage where we need to take hands from honorable members to engage with the presentation. So far, there are only 2 hands. I'm going to request members to raise their hands so that I can note them. We have Honorable Lynchfield, the doctor, Honorable Rian Smith, Honorable Wesley Datlas, Honorable Muela, Honorable Kumbacha. Those will be the members who will engage with the presentation in that order.
Chair, good morning, honorable members. I missed you last week. And thank you to DECO for the presentation. I want to start with a point on alignment with national interests. At MK, we are sure, but I'm not sure if GNU is sure of it or DECO is sure that our continued allocation of foreign funds versus the domestic challenges, actually growing domestic challenges that we have, is a moral issue. I think while we agree and accept that we need a foreign relations footprint, the question, however, lingers that as the domestic challenges continue to deteriorate at an escalating rate, that it does. And I mean, we are talking here Maslow's a hierarchy of needs. We are not talking domestically. You know, things that are not a necessity or a basic necessity. I'm looking for the English word. I mean, we are talking water, electricity, infrastructure, basic needs, education. So I'm not sure if morally, internally, we can justify this footprint that we have of the African Renaissance Fund. However, because it exists, I want to interrogate it at its existence in this idealistic state in which we are, where the fund exists. And I think my first question would be, previously, it has been criticized for poor performance tracking and reporting targets. So if maybe we can be assured how DECO has dealt with that, because I think it continued in the previous two parliaments. I'm not sure how the planning for the 2026-2027 incorporates this. And also it's been criticized for admin delays and inefficiency. So the speed of implementation. So while idealistically we have this fund because we want to champion economic diplomacy, but is it efficient? And then the project sustainability has also always been in question. That no need assessment has been done really to determine the tangible benefits on recipients. That is, it brings into question issues of continuity versus once-off assistance. And not all of these interventions require once-off assistance. So where we have done a once-off assistance, how sure are we of the impact that the money spent had achieved? I would also be in MK would also be interested if you can talk to us about the previously proposed replacement of the fund with the South African Development Partnership Agency. What's the big difference? Why was the proposal made in the first place between the ARF and SADPA? And what would have been the benefits of moving to SADPA instead of maintaining the ARF? And then I also just want to talk about the election observation, because I know the fund is being spent on election observation. I'm not sure if we think that election observation, especially in SADC, has really been fruitful. I mean, I know we have observed in DRC and declared those elections free and fair, but I'm not sure people in Eastern DRC would agree to that. I'm not sure all those communities would have voted in that particular election. The same thing with Zimbabwe. I mean, I'm not sure Zimbabweans would say elections there are free and fair. We have a case as MK now where we attest and are sure that our votes were robbed, but I'm sure there were election observers from SADC. So I'm not sure if expanding the fund on election observation for me is really promotion of economic diplomacy or promotion of our footprint. There are also capacity concerns as the fund is structured to do what it wants to do. I mean, I did say we are not in favor of the fund existing for external assistance when we have internal dilapidating situations, but it exists. So we take it at its existence. So in its existence, there's been capacity concerns that the fund is not adequately capacitated to oversee a vast and diverse projects that it funds, in particular where it involves complex negotiations. So I'm not sure if the 2026-2027 planning is going to assist how you have planned around overcoming this particular challenge. And then the fund has also been said to be caught in the general political missteps that surround DECO, which links to broader controversies, including vetting and personnel appointment. So I think if we can be taken into confidence as MK around those concerns, we would be happy. Once again, thank you for the presentation. And Chair, thank you for the platform.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Bear with me, Honorable Smith. There's a request from Honorable Douglas that he's rushing to another meeting. May he please come in now. Thanks, Honorable Smith, for agreeing. Kindness of you. Honorable Douglas, over to you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair. Let me begin by saying thank you to the Deputy Minister and to DECO for a wonderful presentation. And I think once again that maybe I want to give compliments where compliments are due. The ARF team is a very good representative of the DECO structure because, again, in terms of their fiscal discipline, and they've done a stellar job in terms of their accounting to the Auditor General. Secondly, this department is entirely underfunded and undervalued by the current GNU. and is negatively impacted by its austerity-driven budget, which prioritizes cutting essential services to the people due to IMF and World Bank conditionalities, rather than putting what's in the best interest of our people in South Africa in front of everything else. What we failed to budget for, we will fail to achieve, Mr. Chair. Our embassies are in a terrible condition, and it's given a very bad reflection to the host countries in terms of how we represent ourselves. We're not able to go to conferences, we're not able to go to exhibitions, we're not able to bring teams over, we're not able to give our people opportunities in these countries. And this is all because of budget cuts, because of an austerity-driven budget, Mr. Chair. So we want to condemn that in the strongest of terms. This budget, and while, like I said, ARF has done a good job, there's still a lot of audit problems within DIRCO in and of itself, which have not been actually addressed since last year when we had these same difficult situations, Mr. Chair. Our consular staff are suffering despite all their hard work and are not being supported or funded properly by DIRCO. And this budget shows no signs of addressing the urgency in the shifting geopolitical world we live in. This presentation cannot be treated as a normal administrative APP discussion, because the world we are operating in is no longer normal, Mr. Chair. DIRCO itself tells us that South Africa must operate in a complex and dynamic global environment, and that foreign policy must position the country to engage in global politics, trade, and development. As the chairperson stated in his opening remarks, we live in a world which is hugely impacted by the events of Venezuela, where President Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were illegally kidnapped and are being held hostage in the United States, and the whole country is being held to ransom. And this has a direct impact on the lives of Cubans who are suffering economically severely at the hands of American blockades and sanctions bilaterally imposed with no legal precedent by an aggressive United States. We are also impacted by the war of choice by the USA and Israel to assassinate the former Ayatollah Khamenei and Iranian political leadership and kill thousands of innocent civilians, including innocent school children, in pursuit of their economic and territorial interests through military means. MKP condemns this war of aggression in the strongest terms. An attack on Iran and other BRICS members directly impacts us as part of the global south. And we cannot sit by quietly while nuclear-armed nations target non-nuclear armed countries to rob it of its resources and to villainize and balkanize and divide it as spoils of war. But America and Israel is losing this war. And this also impacts the global south and the global situation. And we see in the fuel levies rise that we had yesterday impacts us directly. When fuel goes up, it impacts all of society, and the poorest to the poor the most. Our food goes up, our electricity goes up, everything goes up. If we do not speak out against these atrocities, the same thing can happen to us here in South Africa. We also strongly condemn the expansion and increase of NATO-led escalation on the Ukrainian war against Russia. Europe's escalation of war against Russia is condemned in the strongest terms and will lead to broader regional war and endless suffering. And as part of BRICS, we condemn NATO and the EU for dragging this war out instead of finding a solution and trying to escalate it by directly attacking Russian territory as active participants in the war, not just Ukraine, using Ukraine as a proxy. All of this is held against the backdrop of increasingly unhinged political attacks and claim of white genocide by President Trump again against South Africa, which has completely been debunked as false and as propaganda led by AfriForum, DA, and other detractors. This has led to our exclusion from the G20 and other bodies. And also they're trying to do a narrative warfare against us. When one looks at all these things, Mr. Chair, there's a serious gap between the scale of the global crisis and potential domestic consequences and the scale of the department's international relations cooperation's response to these issues. The department says its mandate is linked to inclusive growth, job creation, investment, trade, tourism, SADC integration, G20, BRICS, the UN, and peace and security. But the targets are still mostly counting meetings, reports, messages, and engagements. They tell us there will be 30 structured bilateral mechanisms, 30 high-level engagements, 60 economic diplomacy activities, 60 tourism promotion events, and 20 engagements to facilitate financing of DFIs. But Chair, the question is, what is the rand value of those engagements? What export contracts came from them? How many jobs were created by them? How many township businesses, rural producers, township economies, black industrialists, youth enterprises and women-owned companies got market access in those companies because of it? As far as I can see, not many. Because if we cannot answer that, then we are not measuring economic diplomacy. We are measuring diplomatic activity, which is a completely different thing. And I'm going to keep saying this until it changes in DIRCO. And that is where MKP differs fundamentally from the GNU. We would not run embassies as ceremonial offices that's keeping apartheid-era status quo and supports white monopoly capital rather than black business or township economies or young, black, colored, Indian, and even white progressive entrepreneurs. We would run every mission as an economic war room because we are in crisis in our country. And as if everything's normal. Every ambassador would have a performance contract linked to sports open, tourism growth, skills transfer, technology transfer, and direct opportunities for South Africans. The Iran war and the escalation around the Strait of Hormuz now exposes this weakness very, very clearly. Iran has reportedly implemented while the United States has paused its military transit clearing operation and ongoing talks and tensions. This is not a distant Middle East issue, however. It affects the petrol price in Mitchell's Plain, the cost of bread in KwaMashu, the fertilizer prices for farmers, electricity costs, logistics costs, and the cost of living for every poor household. And yet our response is silence. This is wrong, Mr. Chair. South Africa is structurally vulnerable because we import large volumes of crude oil and refined petroleum products priced in dollars, and shocks in global oil markets transmit directly into our economy. We need to start looking at trading in our own currency, and we need to start looking at trading in BRICS currencies. UNCTDA has also warned that higher energy, fertilizer, freight, and insurance costs can push up food prices and deepen cost of living pressure on vulnerable people. So my question to DIRCO is direct. Where is the foreign policy emergency plan for the Iran Hormuz oil fertilizer? Africa's energy security is impacted by all of this. Your APP speaks of 2 summits, 1 UN high-level meeting, 12 multilateral reports, 4 South-South reports, and 2 North-South reports. But where is the measurable crisis response framework? Where is the plan to coordinate the energy, agriculture, trade, and treasury? Where is the diplomatic strategy with BRICS, with OPEC countries, with Iran, China, Russia, India, the Gulf states, and African oil producers to protect South Africa from food and fuel shocks? Chair, MKP would immediately establish a geopolitical economic risk desk inside DIRCO linked to treasury, energy, agriculture, defense, intelligence, and trade. Its job would be to monitor oil, fertilizer, shipping routes, sanctions, war risks, food supply, and insurance costs and currency shocks in real time, and report to Parliament on a quarterly basis. But this kind of thinking is not GNU thinking. Their thinking is keeping the status quo where white monopoly capital can have nice cocktail functions and lots of events with no outcomes for people. Mr. Chair, MKP would use BRICS and South-South cooperation not as slogans, but as practical instruments. We would negotiate alternative oil and fertilizer supply lines, rand, renminbi, and local currency settlement options, strategic fuel reserves, and we need to make sure that our strategic fuel reserves are impacted and grown, and with fertilizer reserves as well, and food security cooperation within countries that are not controlled by Western sanctions pressure. Mr. Chair, when DIRCO says it will use the G20 to tackle inequality and poverty, we say, fine, but bring us the targets, and how are you going to do that if America's kicked you out? How much concessional financing are we going to be doing? How much infrastructure finance? How much climate finance? How much industrial investment? Which projects, which provinces, which jobs? None of that is answered by this APP. None of it is answered by this department. Mr. Chair, the budget also tells a story. DIRCO's total budget only rises from 7.90 billion to 7.227 billion, about 2%. While the department itself admits this does not fully respond to its expanding mandate, and that exchange rate volatility remains a major pressure. Even more concerning, the public diplomacy and state protocol falls from 486 million to 330 million. In a world of information warfare, fake narratives, sanctions, propaganda, and attacks on South Africa's international image, why is public diplomacy being weakened? And why is this budget yet again just another a tick box exercise of more of the same. MKP would build an aggressive public diplomacy machine. African media partnerships, BRICS media platforms, digital embassies, multilingual content, diaspora networks, and rapid response communication whenever South Africa is attacked internationally. Mr. Chair, one of the things that I want to raise is that on the African Renaissance Fund, the numbers are frankly too small for the ambition that they have. As much as they are good at spending the money and accounting for it, it's still not having the right outcomes. The LRF has only 57.961 million in total revenue from 5.56 million rand for human resource development. How can South Africa claim continental leadership with a development instrument of this size? It's impossible. MKP would turn the LRF into a real South African development partnership agency, not another slow bureaucracy, but a strategic African development and influence instrument focused on infrastructure corridors, agriculture, peace building, energy, water, and skills industrialization. So, Chair, our position is simple. This APP must not be judged by how many meetings DIRCO holds. It must be judged by whether South Africa becomes safer, stronger, richer, more sovereign, more respected, and we must make sure that we do it together, Mr. Chair. So from my perspective, we need to do more because in this global moment, South Africa does not just need to be a passive diplomacy and austerity driven. We need strategic discipline and economically militant diplomacy that protects our people from war shocks, open markets, builds African power and restores South Africa's voice in the world. I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I ask that as we move forward, that this department will take seriously the crises that we're in and not do business as normal. Thank you.
Okay, Honorable Douglas. Thank you very much. Good luck to the meeting that you are going to attend. And before you go, I just want to suggest that in addition to presenting the manifesto of the MK, it might be useful to say that the following extracts from the manifesto of what you characterize as the future government of MK, to do extracts and say, in the context of what has been presented here, I'm suggesting that we insert the following so that it can be agreed to here in the committee, so that it becomes a proposal to the committee, then it becomes a decision of the committee.
Noted, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Friendly proposal. Yeah. But otherwise, good luck with your meeting, Honorable Douglas, the son of the first people. Honorable Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair, and my greetings to Deputy Minister Muraka and DG Dangor and the rest of the DIRCO departmental officials, and thank you for the presentations. Chair, I just want to start from the outset by saying that I understand that the time for the budget vote debate is coming at the end of the month. I think it's scheduled for the 25th, where members will be able to go through the line items of the budgets and deliberate it. But I would have appreciated, I think, a slightly more detailed budgetary allocation as opposed to just what looked like the subsections of the budget breakdown presented by the departments. I think it would have been a little bit more helpful for the committee to actually look at the detailed breakdown per subsection so that we could have a look at what actually, it says international relations. I think that some detail there would have been nice, for example, as well as other elements. But I think that maybe members can go through those line items ahead of the budget vote debate. But I do think overall that the presentations were a little bit vague, a bit scant on detail. And Chair, my worry is that at least what was presented to the committee today seems to be far more quantitative rather than qualitative. I don't think it's sufficient to say that the department has published 60 opinion pieces as per the target that was set. What was the content of those opinion pieces? What was achieved? What, did it manage to execute the desired outcome? And I think that goes for all of the targets that were mentioned, because it comes across more as a tick box exercise than an actual presentation of performance past and desired performance for the year ahead. So just one critique there, Chair, for the department maybe to take note of. I think more detail would be appreciated in future, and I think a more qualitative assessment of what the department is undertaking. It would also be nice to see what has been achieved materially in terms of budget allocations from the previous financial year. I'm sure that might obviously come from the annual performance plan as well. But I think some more detail would have been appreciated. Chair, I noted that one of the presentations on the annual performance plan made reference to the national interest. And there was a very, very quick glance over the, let me just find the document, South Africa's National Interest Framework Policy document, which I know was published in 2022, and it seems to have been referenced as the national interest upon which DIRCO is carrying out its duties. But to my knowledge, Chair, that document has never come to this committee. And the question of the national interest is very much something that's in a state of flux at the moment. I know that the President made a commitment after having met with GNU party leaders late last year that there would be a discussion on the national interest, certainly between party leaders and perhaps more broadly at cabinet level. And if I'm not mistaken, those discussions have already taken place. And I just worry that we seem to be flying blind, or rather embarking on a program of action rooted in a national interest that is outdated or is not reflective of the democratic will of the voters of South Africa following the 2024 general election. So, Chair, again, and I've mentioned this in many committee meetings before, this committee still does not know what the national interest is. I don't think South Africans can actually define what the national interest is when it comes to our foreign policy. And if we can't answer that question, then it really seems impossible for us to actually devise an annual performance plan for the department when there's still very many question marks over what exactly it is South Africa is trying to achieve from its foreign policy, not just in what are partial party political desires, but interests that are rooted in what is best for the people of the Republic. And I really think it's critical now for this committee to either have that national interest policy document brought so that we can take a look at it and deliberate on it, or have sight or input or some sort of information as to where this discussion is taking place at cabinet level, potentially. There needs to be some input from this committee on the national interest. We are the engine room at Parliament to help inform South Africa's foreign policy, and it seems as if much of this is being kept away from committee members in this committee. And I think really it's difficult for us to assess an APP when none of us actually know what the national interest is. So I think that's my first concern. Secondly, Chair, I'm grateful that the APP pulled out and mentioned the Government of National Unity Statement of Intent, particularly the goal of rapid economic growth, which I think is crucial. I know that Minister Lamola has stated economic diplomacy is one of the primary objectives of the department over the course of this term. I do think realistically then, DIRCO needs to look at blockages, legislative blockages, to advancing trade and investment in South Africa and the growing of the South African economy by means of our foreign missions, which really need to be weaponized not just by competent staff, but by a revised policy suite that actually aligns with what South Africa is trying to achieve in terms of its economic diplomacy agenda. We cannot send ambassadors and heads of mission to look for investment when companies would much rather avoid or disinvest in South Africa in favor of other African countries because of economic redress legislation that is ineffective and is a massive dissuasion to investment, such as BEE, to the onerous labor framework that South Africa has via the Labor Relations Act, and more broadly via a very restrictive immigration policy that is really not compatible with South Africa as a developing nation and as a developing economy, trying to achieve our economic diplomacy objectives. And I really think that DIRCO should be leading this conversation and should be coming back and engaging with DTIC, for example, as to what legislative blockages are making it difficult or rather impossible for us to actually achieve the objectives that DIRCO is outlining in its APP. So it's all fine and well for us to come in and set lofty goals for the department, but everything must align. The laws, the legal framework, the legislative environment that we create in South Africa must all work harmoniously towards the goals that this department is setting. And if economic diplomacy is our primary objective, then we need to look very honestly at the domestic policy suites of the country and where reforms and changes need to be made. And those, again, must be brought to Parliament. This is a legislative engine room as well. We need to amend laws. We need to look at where laws can be improved, where laws that are not working can be repealed and replaced with something better. Because in the absence of that, it's just business as usual, and it doesn't really seem as if we're taking this mandate seriously, at least not seriously enough as legislators. So just that point, Chair, and if the department can maybe weigh in on that, whether or not there is engagement with DTIC, whether or not there is an awareness of the legislative blockages towards what the department is trying to achieve. I think most recently, one of the best examples is the Nissan factory that closed down as part of Nissan's international restructuring, which opted rather to leave South Africa and open up shop in Egypt, where it found that the conditions for manufacturing, for labor and for immigration were far more favorable than anywhere here in South Africa. So it's really concerning to see that we are bleeding investment and bleeding jobs and economic growth because we stubbornly cling to policies domestically that do not support what we're trying to achieve by means of economic diplomacy in the department. And I think this is really a root cause of much of the difficulties that this department will continue to experience until we take these issues seriously. And then, Chair, just more broadly, just taking a look, I know that there's been a slight increase in the budget allocation, as was mentioned by the department, but they did mention as well that this is not necessarily able to expand DIRCO's abilities to undertake its priorities because there are still a number of vacancies, for example, and factoring inflation in example, it doesn't really make much of a difference meaningfully. But I also think that DIRCO maybe needs to look at a very strategic reprioritization of its structure. We have one of the largest foreign services in the world, which really is disproportionately large in relation to our status as a developing economy. And if we don't have the money to financially sustain the number of foreign missions that we have, to the point where, yes, we may have an embassy in, I think it's 140 countries at this rate, but whenever we conduct oversight, we keep hearing that there are 5 or 6 staffers having to share a laptop at a foreign mission, that there's no ITC services, that there are very little, if any, resources made available for foreign mission staffers. We haven't had an ambassador in Australia for over 3 years. If we don't have enough money to run a capable foreign service of this size, And if our expenses far outweigh the income of this department, then the writing is on the wall. We need to look at which embassies are strategic. We need to look at quality over quantity again in terms of our foreign presence internationally. And if foreign missions are being assessed in a meaningful manner, and if many are not performing, they must be closed or they must be downgraded in favor of those that actually work and in favor of those that actually bring in what South Africa requires from economic diplomacy initiatives. And so, Chair, I really think that if the department can maybe speak, I know that there have been some closures of embassies over the past year. So I know that there is a process already underway to look at the financial constraints and how those factor into the costs of running embassies in certain countries. But I do think this needs to be looked at far more intensively in the best interest of this budget and to make sure that money is actually spent effectively and that South Africans get bang for their buck when it comes from our foreign service. And that goes as well, Chair. The other point that I'd like to make is I know that while the mandate of the maintenance of South Africa's foreign assets by means of our buildings and embassies was transferred to DIRCO from Public Works, I think about 10 years ago, that budget was not transferred either, nor was the skills and expertise when we're looking at the maintenance of our foreign assets, because you cannot transfer the mandate of one department to another without the money. Nothing happens without a budget. And I really think that is something that either must be renegotiated between the two departments. That budget from Public Works, I don't know where it's gone to, and maybe the DG for South Africa to maintain its to do probably matter. And that's the balance. We need today. So I really think that it would be prudent for the department to inform this committee and the Republic of where money is going to be sourced from, to look after our foreign assets and make sure that we have embassies that we can be proud of as a nation, that are staffed by competent South Africans who are not discouraged from doing their work because they are sent to represent our country abroad without any resources. So those are my key concerns, Chair. And just to finish off, I wasn't going to speak to matters of foreign policy, but seeing as though they have been topical throughout the vein of this debate, or the vein of this discussion rather, I find it interesting that we've referred to Israeli aggression towards Iran, which I think the department and the Deputy Minister are justified in raising, but seemingly not the aggression from Iran on its neighbors in the region, the Iranian attacks on Iraq, on the United Arab Emirates, on Qatar, on Saudi Arabia, and many countries which had nothing to do with the initial strikes on Iran in the first place. And it seems as if the department is trying to paint this out in a very one-sided and partial view, which is certainly not the reality of the conflict more broadly. Yes, it's having a tremendous bearing on the global financial system, and we are feeling it too. But I think it's critical for the department to paint an objective picture and a factual and realistic picture of what's taking place in geopolitical conflicts, lest we come across as being captured, or rather being very partially and selectively representative of what's happening in the global system. And on that note, Chair, also, I think one of the assertions from one of the previous speakers that Ukraine has waged a war on Russia. Well, the last time I checked, it was the Russian Federation that invaded Ukraine, which led to Ukraine having to defend its territorial integrity and state sovereignty from really ridiculous Russian aggression. which is a threat to one of our largest trading partners in the European Union. And I really think it's important for us to just have a balanced grasp of what's happening on the international stage with regards to geopolitical conflicts. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just before we step off you, Honorable Smith, who said Ukraine has waged war on Russia?
It was Honorable Douglas, Chair.
Oh, Douglas. Oh, okay, okay. Can we go to Honorable Klute?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Greetings to the honorable members, Deputy Minister, all protocol observed. Chair, firstly allow me to welcome the presentation that was presented by Terku. And allow me to go to my question straight, Honorable Chair. I hope I'm audible, Chair.
Yes, you are audible, Honorable Klute. We can hear that you've got a bout of flu, but you are audible, very audible.
No, it's my disability voice, Chair. So that's why I'm asking.
Oh, okay, sure.
So, yeah, Chair. So, given that the South African G20 presidency is now passed, what were the concrete measurable outcomes achieved in advancing the South African national interest, investment, the trade and the African agenda, and how are these reflected in the 2026-2027 APPs? With only 2% budget increase to 7.227 billion, how exactly will Terku prioritize resources and still achieve the ambitious targets, particularly the 300 plus economic diplomacy engagements, Chair? Then I also wanted to know, Honorable Chair, what is the current vacancy rate for head office and mission combined, and what is the realistic timeline and strategy to fill critical diplomatic and specialized posts despite the COE constraints? How will Terku specifically measure, quantify, and publicly report the actual economic returns? Investments secure, exports increase, job creates from its 60 economic diplomacy activities and the 60 tourism promotion events. Lastly, Chair, is that what tangible improvements have been made or will be made to enhance the quality, speed, and effectiveness of consular service for South African citizens in distress abroad? Then I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Klute. Thank you very much, Honorable Klute. Honorable Muela. Ndate Muela. Honorable Kumbacha. Honorable Kumbacha.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope I'm audible. Good morning to yourself, Chairperson, honorable members present in the session, and also the DM and the team from DECO and Parliament too. Chairperson, firstly, I'd like to welcome the presentation by the department on the Strat Plan for 2025 to 2030 and the annual performance plan for the financial year of 2026-2027. I think the alignment with the National Development Plan, the Medium Development Plan, and the broader government priorities is related and appreciated. And I also just want to further welcome the department's continued efforts to position South Africa as an influential global actor, particularly through the efforts they are taking in terms of economic diplomacy, regional integration and participation in the multi-network platforms. I think ours as a committee is to continue to focus on ensuring that these plans translate to measurable outcomes and that the key areas such as interdepartmental coordination for economic impact and managing budgetary pressures and from the international commitments translates into efforts to combat poverty and unemployment and inequality in South Africa. I think just some 3 points I just wanted to add, particularly to the presentation today. I think we welcome the department's efforts to strengthen interdepartmental coordination with key economic departments such as trade, DTIC, tourism, etc. However, it remains critical that this coordination does translate into to measurable outcomes, especially in terms of expanding trade opportunities, tangible job creation. And also, we note the ongoing pressures arising from exchange rate volatility and rising operational costs at missions. But I think it's important that the department continues to strengthen contingency planning and build sufficient budget buffers to ensure operational stability in our missions and that we compromise delivery, especially in the key diplomatic missions. And there are many opportunities out there, and I think we really need to leverage on them as a country. And also, I think we widely acknowledge the importance of South Africa meeting its international obligations, through membership contributions. But I think at the same time, there must be stronger mechanisms to assess the return on investment from these contributions and ensuring that South Africa derives clear strategic, economic, and political value from its participation, in these international organizations. And lastly, before I go to my one question, I think it's important to welcome the progress being made in implementing the digital strategy. However, the pace of digital transformation must be accelerated. Beyond the automation of a limited number of business processes in order to significantly improve efficiency, reduce costs, and modernize the department's operations, in line with the dynamic global environment that we witness every day. And then just to go to my question, given the expanding global mandate and the geopolitical complexity, how will the department deliver more with limited fiscal growth? And are there any other innovative ways they're trying to explore to do this? Thank you very much, Chair.
All right, Honorable Kumbatra, thank you very much. Honorable Mhlongo.
Have I been?
Okay. Honorable Mwela, are you back?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Okay, so Honorable Mhlongo, Honorable Mwela.
Yes, greetings to you, Chair, and also greetings to the DERCO staff and also DM in the meeting, and also DM Moraga in the meeting, all honorable members and all the people of South Africa who are following these proceedings through our social networks. Let me take this opportunity and welcome the APP's presentation by the department in order to align and also to indicate the plans in terms of all the 5 programs that the department is responsible for, on how they will want to tackle and the performance that have been made up to so far in order to ensure that our foreign policy and diplomatic policy, it is realized as South Africa, so that we are able to have a good relation as a sovereign state with other foreign countries. Let me start by indicating, Chair, that the APP have indicated their plans with regard to the strengths of the APP as addressed here. The DERCO has planned to benefit from strong
and logical alignment with key national policy frameworks, including the NDP, the GNU priorities, and the MTDP priorities, which have been outlined in the presentation. The department also places a clear emphasis on economic diplomacy as a strategic instrument for driving inclusive growth and job creation. There is also a visible commitment, Chair, to a digital transformation, as we all know that it is a serious crisis that have been identified and which is work in progress, as we have seen the plan that have been outlined here in terms of how they will be dealing with the issue of digital transformation. Youth development in terms of ensuring that they also align themselves with the priorities of government of ensuring that young people are also included in terms of employment that should be integrated and be prioritized by department, gender mainstream and skills enhancement. Furthermore, the APP chair includes high levels of accountability through 100% delivery targets on critical services such as consular support, protocol services, and membership fee payments. The strategic positioning through platforms such as G20, BRICS, and the African Union represents another important strength that the department have indicated with regard to the APPs, which we welcome with open hands that we need to strengthen these particular achievements to ensure that whatever hiccups that have been encountered with regard to these particular APPs are able to be cleared, and we are able to ensure that we deliver for the best of our ability for the people of South Africa, as they are expecting more from DERCO to be able to achieve these particular targets that they have been made. And however, there are some weaknesses, Chair, that we have indicated we are seeing with regard to the APPs. Firstly, with regard to constraint, but very limited real budget growth of only 2% that we have noted, which may not adequately respond to the department's expanding mandate and operational demands. The pace of digital transformation remains low, with only 2 businesses process targeted for automation in the 2026 and 2027 financial year. Public diplomacy as well, Chair. The targets appear modest considering the importance of building stronger domestic support for South Africa's foreign policy. There is also limited detail on how the impact of economic diplomacy engagements will be measured and reported. Persistent high vacancy rates across the department represent a significant internal weaknesses that could undermine overall diplomatic effectiveness. We should ensure that we focus mostly on these issues of ensuring that wherever there is a low human resource personnel, department prioritize there so that they are able to speed up their processes in delivering proper opportunities for the people of South Africa. However, there are most of the opportunities that we have encountered with regard to the representation, especially when it comes to the issue of African continent free trade area. The department could significantly boost intra-African trade and economic relations in this particular area if we are to realize this particular. The expanding of BRICS and South-South cooperation platforms also offers additional avenues for influence and development partnerships. Accelerated digital transformation could also improve operational efficiency and reduce long-term costs. There is also a potential to strengthen coordination with domestic departments such as trade and industry, competition, and tourism to deliver a more integrated one government approach to economic diplomacy. It is very much important, Chair, that we improve our domestic relations with this particular, with other institutions, so that they are able to deliver these particular services efficiently across all our embassies abroad, Chair. When we were doing the oversight abroad, Chair, the issue of lacking of intervention of other departments were highlighted thoroughly, so that we have to ensure that we close that particular gap, so that they are part and parcel of ensuring that service delivery it is realized within the country and even abroad through our services that we are offering. However, I have few questions that I need clarity on, Chair, as I will be concluding. The first one is it is with regard to, given that South Africa's G20 presidency has now passed, what were the concrete measurable outcomes achieved in advancing South Africa's national interest, investment, trade, and African agenda, and how are these reflected in the 2026-2027 APP? With only 2% budget, as I've indicated when I was remarking, Chair, which led to the increase of 7.227 billion. How exactly will DERCO prioritize resources and still achieve its ambitious targets, particularly the 300 plus economic diplomacy engagements? Lastly, what is the current vacancy rate in the head office and missions combined? And what is the realistic timeline and strategy to fill critical diplomatic and specialist posts despite COE constraints which were indicated in the APP? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thanks, Honorable Muela. Honorable Mshongo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to your good selves, Chair, colleagues, the team from DERCO here today, led by the DM and the DG. South Africans following the proceedings online. Chair, I must welcome this report as it is, as it's presented to us. You know, Chair, firstly, I was worried that only when you look at the presentation, it says only in Q4 we'll see youth employed, only 46 youth who are going to be employed. This initiative of ensuring that we get new young people in the space of cadet to participate in diplomatic. I think there's someone else speaking. To see young people being brought to the space of diplomacy, but it is only 46 in a country where it's riddled by high unemployment rate amongst the youth. Chair, I think DERCO must really look at this number and bring something else, Chair, a bigger number than this. We can train more youth in the space of diplomacy. I think 46 is just an insult to the youth of South Africa who are languishing at home without job, without any opportunities. Now, I want to hear what are the practical steps that DERCO is doing to fund the advancement and support for initiatives in line with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. What are the practical steps that we're doing? What are the pipeline plans we have and the timelines in implementing those to ensure that we finally, as South Africa, and implement the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement? Now, Chair, you know, the SADC observer mission, we honestly get value for our money here. I'm asking this because South Africa has participated in many observer election missions here in SADC, and we were the first ones to quickly declare those elections free and fair many times, which I don't really know what's the matter. Why are we doing this? Or is it because of our relationship that South Africa has with former liberation movements in SADC that forces South Africa and our observer missions to declare elections that were clearly compromised and not free and fair as having been free and fair? I'll give an example, Chair. We are the first ones to go and celebrate the elections of 2024 in Mozambique as South Africa, and we sent a delegation by Ramaphosa sent a delegation And South Africa was there in Tanzania in the last elections, and we had observer missions who pulled out. To this day, we are still waiting for a report on what transpired on the elections of Tanzania. If those elections were free and fair, what is our stance on that? I was still waiting for AU. What is SADC saying about that? I was still waiting for SADC. What has our observers that we sent as South Africa have said? What is their report? What is the status quo in that regard? And many times, I don't even want to speak about the position that South Africa has had over the many elections of Zimbabwe that have previously not been free and fair. But we continue to spend money and ensuring that we get observers on behalf of South Africa in these elections. But are we getting value for our money? Are we being really objective as South Africa, or is our objectivity clouded by the relationship we have with the former liberation movements in the region? You know, Chair, when I'm looking at what is being proposed for budget allocation for 2026-2027, I'm worried by the lack of significant increase on the funds or the budget for compensation of employees. In 2025-2026, if I remember correctly, TM and the Terco team will correct me if I'm wrong. I think the department had just a little bit over a vacancy rate of 24% in the department, and including the missions. And if we don't have a significant increase on compensation of employees, it means the vacancy rate of Terco will continue, will not be able to hire and fill those vacancies, because this slight increase that we are seeing, which is really insignificant, considering the fact that our salaries get to be affected by exchange rates when we pay our staff members outside of South Africa, and then the vacant the rate fluctuates here and there. So I'm worried, Chair, even again in 2026 will not be seen, and the vacancy rate of Terco being brought to less than 1%. It means it's going to increase, and we don't have plans. What are the plans by Terco to ensure that we don't also overwork our employees by the failure of Terco to fill these vacancies due to lack of funds? Now, our embassies in Africa, some of them leave little to be desired. I'm really interested to know, have we identified embassies that we are going to renovate this year as DERCO? And how many are we looking to renovate and improve their condition per region? Because I remember the state of the mission in Zimbabwe that was described to us when we were doing oversight. It left little to be desired. Again, the issue of ICT, at our missions, really, Chair, when we speak about it, it sounds like we're a scratch record, because we keep repeating ourselves because this is a persistent issue, and I don't see us resolving it anytime soon. And I think we agreed last time when we were in Lusaka, Chair, that we're going to call those responsible for ICT in the department, and we bring the DG, we bring everybody, and who's got something or some role to play in terms of the ICT in the department to come to us and account how far are they with improving the ICT infrastructure, in digitalizing our embassies, and ensuring that we use the best possible ICT devices and equipment at our embassies. To this day, Chair, I don't remember us convening such a meeting, or I don't remember us, Chair, even having a date proposed on when we can hold the department accountable on this issue that we have all resolved on. Some targets of the department, Chair, when you look at the APP, is laughable, if I might say. It's very laughable, because we are dealing with 60, I think it was 60 opinion pieces. We are dealing with some engagements that we really don't know. I wish we can be told that some of these engagements qualitatively and quantitatively. What is it that after these engagements we have achieved? I will give you an example at DM. I want to use some engagement that the DM engaged on herself on behalf of the department to show you that there's nothing that you got from that. If there's something, DM, please take us into confidence and tell us what is it that qualitatively and quantitatively you were able to achieve in this engagement. Chair, the TM and the department engages in these engagements. They're saying that it's they put it on the scorecard of the department on what is it that they've achieved. But for me, it's not an achievement, it's a tick box exercise. Take, for example, the TM came to the Nkomazi local municipality for a DERCO public participation in Bizo. That Bizo aimed to attract investment, strengthen partnerships, and grow the province's tourism sector through sustainable and climate resilient infrastructure development and educate on the issues of floods constantly affecting our areas. You will know, Chair, that the Nkomazi local municipality is always every year, I think since early 2000, affected by early 2000, 2001, has always been affected, especially during December, January, February months, being affected by floods in most parts of the municipality. Now, the DM came, I think it was on the 28th of February in Nkomazi municipality to do this public participation in Bizo. Now, Chair, honestly speaking, the community of Nkomazi does not need to be lectured and be taught about floods. They have lived experiences over the years. They've lost their properties, their businesses, their livestock, their farms been destroyed by floods. They've lost a lot. They've lost a lot. The people of Nkomazi because of due to floods. They don't need anyone to come and lecture them about floods. They need solutions. And what are those solutions? They need the ANC government that is leading the Nkomazi local municipality to build infrastructure. They failed. The Nkomazi local municipality has failed to build infrastructure. There's no stormwater drainage system in the entire Nkomazi municipality, right? And then you come and lecture people about floods. There'll be flooding because the water gets to be all over when it's raining because there's no stormwater drainage system. Number two, the low-lying bridges of Nkomazi need to be upgraded and be brought up in order to resolve these issues that normally the bridges of Nkomazi, the low-lying bridges of Nkomazi are flooded and people lose their lives by forcing to try to cross those rivers, whether in cars or on foot, Chair. So they don't need somebody to come and lecture them. They need the government to take responsibility and do their part in ensuring that there's proper infrastructure in order to, to assist the communities when there's floods and there are a lot of during the rain season. Just last night, Chair, if I can show you that these engagements that the department sometimes engage on, they are fruitless and meaningless and leave no impact in the community. Just last night, the Nkomazi municipality again was hit by storm, and in the Buffelsprite community, Ward 29 in Buffelsprite, houses were badly damaged. Most of the houses there in Ward 29 in Buffelsprite, their roof were blown away. School, a school there in Buffelsprite, Salem School, damaged. Businesses, including a butchery, a fuel station, badly damaged last night due to that storm of last night, including informal businesses in the area. And the road, the R57, R570 road was badly affected as well. So if you can ask the TM, okay, this engagement she had in Nkomazi, did it assist with flooding in the area? No. Did it bring investment? Since then, what is the investment that has been brought forward? If it is there, can you please direct us TM to that investment that we're able to attract the municipality of Nkomazi to the engagements that you do? There are many examples of this, Chairperson, that DERCO engages on, and we don't see tangible results, something that we can measure, something that we can point at and say, okay, after this engagement that you have had in this municipality, and these are now the results of it. Perhaps TM can show us the investment that DERCO and the municipality of Nkomazi was able to attract when they did this Imbizo, or I think on the 28th of February this year. To really show you that we are department driven by tick box exercises. It's like we like to have nice to haves, we like to have engagements and go to communities and discuss. And really, those discussions we're having, I don't think is bringing something materialistic. And Chair, DERCO on priority one of government, on the drive for inclusive growth and job creation. How are we contributing to this as DERCO when we've got a high vacancy rate in the department and we can see the skyrocketing fuel prices that have rapidly impacted, that are going to rapidly impact and on our people in terms of poverty and the high rising cost of living. What is the stance of DERCO on this issue of skyrocketing fuel prices? I think today fuel has increased since 12 midnight. I think petrol with 17 cent, diesel with 5 rand 19 cent increase. And we have seen a huge increase again in April. Diesel, I think, was increased by 7 rand in April. This has a negative impact on the cost of living. Food prices will go up. Cost of traveling will go up. Majority of South Africans rely on public transport to commute to and from work. This is going to increase. Bus prices are going to increase. Taxi prices are going to increase. Prices for scholar transport is going to increase. Parents who rely on public scholar transport for their children to travel from home to school is going to increase. What is DERCO doing into this space? How are we aiming to resolve these challenges? And what are we planning to do, with our, as South Africa has now taken over the presidency of SADC after what happened in Madagascar. What are our priorities in that regard as chairperson of SADC? What is it that we seek to achieve in that regard, TM? And perhaps what is the plans of DERCO and the president in that regard? And what are our plans that we have with AU, Chair, in terms of us participating in this Peace and Security Council? What are we doing in that regard? And when we offer humanitarian crises in countries, how do we then go back and evaluate if what we have offered as humanitarian aid to these different countries? How do we measure if indeed it worked? And Chair, when we deal with a budget vote 6, I want to propose that, on behalf of the EFF, that we allocate funding, we increase the funding for Cuba for humanitarian aid to ensure that the people of Cuba receive the aid that they need. We have seen a lot of embargoes on Cuba. We can't afford to have a country like Cuba giving up. They must hold on to the struggle. They must continue, but they need us as South Africa. Cuba was there for us as South Africa during apartheid time. We need to continue to look at funding many projects in Cuba through the ARF, ensuring that Cuba receives humanitarian aid and ensuring that women, children, and the youth and the people of Cuba get access to food, get access to some of their daily needs, get access to some of the infrastructure that must be improvised, to electricity, to a lot of stuff, because we have seen what the US government is doing, the country of Cuba. We've seen what the US is doing in Venezuela. We need the voice of South Africa to be strong, to continue to condemn that Donald Trump on what he has done in Venezuela by illegally abducting the president of Venezuela and his wife, who's also a member of parliament, Ms. Celia Maduro, and President Maduro. They are illegally kept in prison. We need the voice of South Africa to be consistent, to be strong, and we must never cower. We must never cower as South Africa in these trying times. we need to continue supporting ATM. We're supporting UTM. We need South Africa to continue to raise the voice and the issues of the people of the Republic, Islamic Republic of Iran. We need the people of Iran to know that we support them and they've got the right to self-defend. No one can attack you and you keep quiet. I can't allow my neighbor soil to be used to kill me. And if I allow my neighbors to offer their territory to my enemies to kill me, then I'm a coward if I'm going to say, because you are my neighbor, I'll allow you to use your soil so that my enemies must finish me off. You are not a neighbor of mine. It's not neighborly. In fact, it's not neighborly to allow foreign agencies to use your territory to attack your neighbor. So we must not shy away from continuing to support the people of Iran in this difficult time. They must know they are with us. They must be strong. They must remain consistent. They must never be tied to defend themselves from the imperial forces of the US and the genocidal Israel. We must continue, Chair, to ensure that we look and support the people of Palestine. We must ensure that the embassy of Palestine here in South Africa, in the capital city, in the city of Tshwane, gets proper funding allocated to them. If it means that DERCO must assist them to continue to run their embassy, we must ensure that the people of Palestine know that we're with them. And lastly, Chair, we need to ensure that the people of Western Sahara, they receive funding. We continue to fund the people of Western Sahara through ARF so that they too deserve a democracy. We know that Western Sahara was illegally occupied by Morocco, and we need to continue to raise the voice of South Africa in condemning Morocco in what they're doing in Western Sahara. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Honorable Mthongo. Honorable Klute, I see your hand is still up. Okay, Honorable Klute is not aware that his hand is up. DM, from my side is just two things. The first is... yes, no, thanks, Honorable Klute. The first is the presenter. If you can go back to slide... Sure, what slide is it? But there's a slide where you spoke about cultural diplomacy. If you can just look for that slide, because I wanted to make a comment on the cultural diplomacy. My second point, whilst you are looking for the slide, is a proposal that we have been making from the time Mena Lady Pando was the Minister of DERCO. We will have to reach a stage in our plans to set targets for our missions. And our missions targets must be based on this economic diplomacy that we are driving, which is very important. For instance, yeah, it is that slide. Just keep it like that. For instance, it will help a lot for the people of South Africa and Parliament to know what is our target for foreign direct investment from each of the 115 countries where we have missions, which means some empirical research will have to be done so that these commitments that are made by investors in the investment summit in Sandton, they are part of the bigger South African agenda to woo investors through DERCO in cooperation with DTIC to South Africa. This will require, Deputy Minister and your team, a lot of work. A lot of work, because technical work has to be done to prepare for the targets, so that when people are made ambassadors and CGs representing South Africa, before they are appointed, they must be taken through what will be expected of them, so that you don't appoint them first and later you indicate to them what is it that is expected of them. That over and above receiving guests who leave South Africa and visit other countries, at the core of using resources at their disposal coming from this budget that we are discussing for them to quantify each of the countries where we've got missions in one financial year. What is the number of investments that we are going to bring into the country? As soon as that is done, then we will have to do, ourselves and yourselves, a tracking mechanism where we track on a weekly, monthly basis whether we are moving towards that target. Technology allows us today to plot the targets and be able to do follow-up. People are able to, in the stock markets, to follow performance of every currency minute by minute. It should be possible for us to have a technology that will enable us to track whether every mission is helping us to move towards achieving the targets. We will then be able to quantify the volume of investments contribution to the South African economy. As soon as those investments are here, we can then do qualitative assessment, because they will start employing people, they'll start developing the skills of the local people, they will start doing skills transfer, they will start doing expansions, and as people earn salaries and wages, it means it will improve their general livelihood. So Honorable Smith was talking about quality and quantity and so on. So it is at that stage where we will be able to quantify. But at the same time, I think you working together with DTIC, we must start that exercise with foreign directly investing companies that are already here in South Africa. And we start that exercise. It's not a simple exercise. It will require a lot of agencies, because it means you'll have to do some kind of a dissection working with Stats SA and other institutions that are dealing with variables contributing to South Africa's economy. It means you'll have to do dissection of each and do assessment of each. So a serious government will have to do that, so that we move from qualitative to quantitative and vice versa, because then the qualitative will inform you whether you must continue to intensify the quantitative, which is the volumes of investments that we are getting into South Africa. Nissan has moved to Egypt, right, from South Africa. And I see some people are saying, yeah, Nissan is now moving from South Africa to Egypt, but they are still in the African continent. And we ourselves, we subscribe. We are not just the subscribers. We were the engineers of the Africa Continental Free Agreement, because its genesis is from the African Renaissance, which is anchored on NEPAD. Right? That's its genesis. So, yes, we must be concerned, but it shouldn't matter much that companies are beginning to move around in the African continent. Because if they move around in the African continent and it enhances economic integration of the African continent, so be it. So be it. As long as we know the reasons we have engaged Nissan and so on, it's a win-win. It's a win-win because they remain in Africa. If they had moved out of the African continent, I will say that we must be concerned that they've moved out of the African continent. So for me, Deputy Minister, there's a huge, huge task at so for now, it's fine. Let's leave this thing as it is. But we need a guarantee from the department that as part of a paradigm shift, which is going to anchor our economic diplomacy, we are going to put in place instruments that will help us set targets for every embassy, for every mission, and they must not be thumb-sucked targets. It means we must work with institutions of research like universities and other institutions, the think tanks and so on, to say what is reasonable that we can set as a target for every mission of South Africa. If we do that, it will then help us assess the type of staff, the type of bureaucracy you want to attach to a mission, because it's not homogeneity that will apply. In this instance, you'll treat every mission based on its own peculiarities. So if we do that, I think we will be on another trajectory. We will put South Africa at another trajectory in as far as dealing with these matters of economic diplomacy are concerned. So that's my plea on economic diplomacy. Okay, let's go back to the slide now. I'm looking for that cultural. You can. Where is it? Cultural diplomacy. I'm asking the presenter because it was verbalized when you were presenting. You spoke about it when you were on this slide.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to give over to Ms. Sampo.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's not on the slide, but we spoke about it when we were speaking about the slide about the focus areas, where we spoke about supporting the initiatives to promote.
Let's go to it. Let's go to that slide. I just want to make sure.
It is this slide, Chair. But however, in our presentation, we elaborated further on regional integration, and that's where we spoke about cultural diplomacy and fostering relations across Africa. Thank you, Chair.
So it's not in the text, because the problem is if it's just alluded to and it's not in the text, we can't hold you accountable on it. We will be hallucinating. So I'll request the Deputy Minister that this cultural diplomacy thing is embedded in text in as far as the ARF is concerned. Yes, I know it's in the context of our relations that we need to build and strengthen and deepen in the African continent. So I'm just saying it's a good thing. You did a good thing, cultural diplomacy, but put it in text. Put it in text. It will help us a lot to resolve some of the emerging problems that we are facing in the African continent, particularly in South Africa. We don't know this attitude that is emerging now, that we are xenophobic, which is not true, because South Africans don't hate other Africans. What South Africans are raising, it's a question that we need to go deeper on. What South Africans are raising is poverty levels are very high, the unemployment is very high, inequality. We are the most unequal society in the world. It's very, very high. We are number one when it comes to that. And what they are raising is the meager resources that are at our disposal should only be exposed to other African brothers and sisters who come into the country legally. That's all. That's not being xenophobic. That's not the hate against Africans. That's just saying, yes, the resources are here. We can you bring other resources. We can share the little bit that is at our disposal, but let's do it within the confines of the law. For you to share with us here in the country, come in legally. Show and demonstrate to us what is it that you are bringing that we don't have in the country, and then that's okay. So if we use that cultural diplomacy instrument, we can then engage better with resources, allowing us to do so. We can then engage better with our other African brothers and sisters on this matter. Just before I give the DM, Honorable Lynchfield, Honorable Smith earlier on said, Honorable Douglas alluded to the fact that the Russians, no, not the Russians, the Ukrainians, Kiev has embarked on an onslaught against Russia. So I don't know whether who is right between what Honorable Smith is saying and whether that is the position of your organization. Because we all know that.
I am here, Mr. J. Could I clarify?
Yes, let me just conclude. Because we all know that it's on record that what is at the center of Russia's grief is that based on peace settlements that were done in the past, one of the fundamental principles agreed to was that there will be no encroachment by NATO. There will be no encroachment by NATO towards Russia. And Russia believes, I'm not saying we agree with Russia, I'm just stating what they are saying. Russia believes that NATO has flouted those peace agreements by using Kiev, which is Ukraine, to then undermine those agreements and therefore encroach and pose a risk militarily and security-wise towards Russia. Over to you, Honorable Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. J. Let me just put on record that from our perspective, this thing can't be oversimplified. This is not what Honorable from the DA has said. It wasn't an unprovoked invasion. This didn't happen in a vacuum, Mr. J. The roots of this conflict stretch back many years, and this is well known and documented through the
that we need to also take the portfolio committee members into confidence with regard to the South Africa's national interest document as it was adopted, and members ought to now start to look at it and appreciate the work that we do. That issue will be led by our Director General, where he talks to this issue substantively so that all of us we can appreciate where we are as a Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And I think, Chair, with regard to the concerns that are raised by Honorable Smith, where he is requesting a detailed breakdown of the budget allocation, and I think we need to appreciate the fact that all the APPs that are being developed by all our departments within the 7th administration of the South African government are being compiled in line with the SMART principles that are being set out by the National Treasury. Our APP can therefore go beyond what is required in terms of the reporting template that is given to all the department. We are always urged by the National Treasury that our APP must be smart, must be measurable, it must be accurate, it must be realistic, and also it must be timeous. So we are adhering to the SMART principle, Honorable Smith, when we present this kind of documents to your good selves. But to indicate to yourselves that please utilize the APP to hold the department accountable. And it is only through the quarterly reports and the annual reports that we can therefore go to our operational plan and report accordingly in line with the targets that we have set for ourselves for this financial year. So we'll then be held accountable in that regard. And I want to urge the team from DERCO to respond to the technical issues that the honorable members have raised, especially the issue of the G20 legacy project, because it is only through the presidency of South Africa's G20 that we have managed to elevate issues that are of importance towards regional economic integration of the continent of Africa. We are the South African government during our G20 presidency that have brought onto the agenda of the G20 the issue of harnessing of our critical minerals and the beneficiation at source. And now, as we speak here, Honorable Chairperson, all African member states are now singing this rhetoric that we have sang during our G20 presidency. We are now destined for a greatness in terms of how we need to now work towards industrializing the economies of all our African member states. These are some of the success stories of our G20 presidency. And we also elevated the issue of addressing the climate issues, where we were calling for the climate resilient economies. Of course, we continue to appreciate the fact of the issues of the climate change that continues to befell us as the countries of the global south. Yes, Honorable Mhlongo, I had undertaken our outreach program to the Mpumalanga province immediately after that province, together with the province of Limpopo, has been hit in a negative way by the floods that have recently hit our country. That outreach program has managed to yield the tangible results to a point that even the Premier, together with his cabinet in the province of the Free State, working together with those affected municipalities, were meeting for the first time with our ambassadors that are here in Pretoria, that are looking at avenues that they can help us to intervene on matters of building our climate resilient provinces so that we continue to build infrastructure that can withstand these floods every time when they continue to hit our provinces in a negative way. So if there is a report that is required by the portfolio committee, we can easily share it with your good selves immediately after this meeting. And I think the outreach programs ought to be driven by ourselves at the level of the executive, because we have taken a decision, a conscious decision, that we must never miss an opportunity at the executive level, whether the minister and the two DMs must never miss the opportunity to interact or have an interface with our communities that we lead. And we utilize these outreach programs to go on the ground and meet with our communities, of course, on a specific issue of interest that those communities ought to have been concerned about. So indeed, we'll continue to engage with our communities and encourage them to participate in our diplomatic discourse that we continue to have, because it was yourselves in this portfolio committee that were saying South Africans don't understand the mandate and the vision of this department. So we are utilizing these outreach programs to go to our communities and also engage with our think tanks within the institutions of higher learning that we have in the country, so that our people can start to appreciate the mission and the vision of this Department of International Relations and Cooperation. So I want to leave it at that, Honorable Chairperson, and indicate that the DG, together with his team, inclusive of Mr. Munyela, must then talk to the issues that talks to the technical issues that are being raised here, including the ICT strategy that we are aiming to implement in our missions abroad. I think the team is better placed to can explain those details to the honorable members, so that we leave here with a clear appreciation of where the Department of International Relations and Cooperation is moving towards in that direction. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'll hand over to the DG. He will then be followed by Mr. Munyela to talk to those ICT infrastructure defects that you have observed in our missions abroad. Thank you very much. DG, over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, Honorable Chair. So I'll touch on a couple of the questions and then hand over to the CFO, Ms. Simple, and then Mr. Munyela if he's online. Otherwise, we'll have to deal with it briefly. So the first issue that I'll deal with then, as recommended, is on the National Interest Framework. As indicated, the framework was approved in 2019 after consultations with academics and other stakeholders. Recently, given the global dynamics, including the kinds of events that have been discussed earlier in this portfolio committee, we presented to Cabinet the international framework in the context of these changes, and the discussion also then looked at whether the framework was relevant to the current context. There was a general agreement at Cabinet level that the framework as it stands, including looking at national interest and values, including economic interest, military interest, and a range of other interests, was still appropriate for the context that we are in. There was an agreement by Cabinet that the document is appropriate, but that following Cabinet, that the leaders of the GNU will discuss further on the agreement made by Cabinet. Must say that before the discussion at Cabinet, there was a short briefing on request by myself and the Minister to what is called the GNU Clearinghouse. That was the first time that has ever happened. But I do think that we can, with the Chair's permission, if there's a date set, we can actually bring that presentation to the Portfolio Committee because Cabinet has already worked through that as the executive. I think the second issue, and I think the chair, the deputy minister spoke about the economic diplomacy issue. There is also on the cabinet's agenda we need to table the economic diplomacy framework and strategy that has taken almost a year to finalize, which is through intensive discussions between all the major key stakeholders within government, and also with some private sector players. We hope that we can do this at the next cabinet meeting, and then we can also bring it to the portfolio committee after the executive has really engaged with it thoroughly. But it does touch on many of the issues that has been raised by members in this meeting. I think what we must also then do is also emphasize that we will do some of the issues as the chairs indicated on the indicators. And what the document will also point out in our presentation is that job creation, for example, has got many sort of levers, that will require, for successful job creation, that includes macroeconomic policy, industrial policy, investment in skills and other capacities. And then DIRCO essentially will be dealing with how trade is governed at a bilateral level, and the access and contacts we can be making there, together with our sister departments. We then also deal with the barriers to international trade, whether this is the WTO level, at the customs level. So we will also bring some of that into the discussion, and then how we can leverage our footprint as a means to improve what the sister departments are doing on the investment front. So I think that's an important discussion that I think we can bring to cabinet as well. I think it's worth commenting as well, as Honorable Smith spoke about the footprint. South Africa has got a significant footprint, but it's by no means one of the largest. The overall average of G20 countries, OECD countries, and Asia countries sits at about 117 missions abroad. The G20 average of G20 countries is 193 missions. The OECD average is 130, and the Asia average is 101. So our 114 missions is below the overall average, but we do have a much bigger internal footprint, which we've got 204 missions inclusive of international organizations. And if we reduce our global footprint, reciprocity will kick in, and we will lose the footprint that we have in Pretoria, which is amongst the highest in the world. And that too is a space for diplomatic work, both politically and economically. So that is a discussion that we may want to have, and we shouldn't be looking at the diplomatic footprint as only a cost issue. It's actually also an amplifier for the issues that we want to achieve. So I thought that was important just to put that out in terms of the Global Diplomatic Index. One of the points just on economic issues before I move off, and I'll talk about it more on the G20 legacy issues, is that in our engagements on economic diplomacy, there will be movements of investments from place to place. But what has emerged in discussions in the international space is perhaps global agreements on wage labor and also other regulatory environments, because there is a sense that there's a movement by some countries and some companies in particular to low wage jurisdictions, which is driving inequality higher. And we also need to assess that in the context of some of the issues that were raised on our domestic policy. And so the domestic policy on labor regulation and labor rights cannot be de-linked from what is happening elsewhere in the world. On the G20 legacy issue, so I think the G20 legacy is significant. South Africa, our presidency has delivered many outcomes that are important, not only for ourselves, but also for the African continent, and that includes debt sustainability issues, where we had an agreement led by the finance track on debt sustainability, particularly for countries in the South, but also for African countries. And if we can get the implementation of that debt sustainability framework and agreement, it will make the ability of African countries to borrow in the international markets for economic development a lot easier and a lot fairer. So our legacy issues includes the debt sustainability issue. It includes the establishment for the very first time of an international panel on inequality. An extraordinary committee was established under our presidency by President Ramaphosa, and what that document indicates, and it includes some of the top researchers globally and economists globally, and it's chaired by a Nobel laureate, Professor Stiglitz, was that inequality harms growth, not just in South Africa, but globally as well. But it's also one of the biggest threats to democratization globally, where because of the promise of democratization has not yielded economic benefits, people are questioning the value of democracy. And we will see a race to the bottom on the democracy index without necessarily changing the lived experiences. So this international poverty, the report has established an international panel on inequality, and it's one of the key legacy outcomes for South Africa. So all the other outcomes, and I won't go into them, which includes the Ubuntu approaches on food security, the high-level principles on combating illicit financial flows. These are all outcomes of the South Africa's G20 presidency. These were approved by a resolution of the African Union, which means that the African Union, together with other institutions linked to the African Union, will be implementing these legacy projects in the absence of continuity with the current presidency, which is the US. We've had a discussion with the UK around continuity, and it is essentially an informal handover to the 2027 president about some of the key issues that we have delivered and that they may consider taking forward from a continuity perspective in the G20. And I think that's the question that dealt with the G20. There was also some comments and remarks around what are we doing in terms of the high fuel prices as DERCO. This morning, there was an interdepartmental meeting led by the DTIC, but including Department of Transport, Energy, and essentially it's a whole of government approach to reducing the cost in terms of the fuel increases, the increase in bus fares. So we're looking at the administered prices and to what extent we can use the administered prices to buffer the worst impacts on South Africans. This discussion will be taken to Cabinet, and hopefully Cabinet will be able to make a decision sooner rather than later, because, for example, the energy increases have already been approved, and if the approval to the suggestion that they be put in abeyance for a certain amount of time is to be taken by Cabinet, this would have to be done sooner rather than later. I can't go into the details of that because this is led by DTIC together with the Department of Transport and Energy, but of course, working with DERCO and other key stakeholders, and it will go to Cabinet rather quickly given the urgency of it. I'm now going to hand over to the CFO to talk around the issues of properties and the vacancy rate.
Thank you, DG. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Greetings to our Deputy Minister. Chair, let me first start by appreciating the input from the honorable members in relation to our budget presentation, vacancy rates, as well as the properties. And I would like to invite the honorable members, Chair, to partner with the department to discuss these matters in the forums where it will matter as well. Chair, if I could just deal with the issues of vacancy first. Indeed, we have a vacancy rate of about 26.3%. When you look at our vacancies, that translates to about 624 vacancies in the department. 522 of that is from head office and 102 of that is from missions. And yes, there is an element of staff morale that we have to deal with as a department or as management of the department, which we need to work on based on the work or the overloading of the staff in the department. HR has, or Human Resources Unit has presented a recruitment and selection project or plan to finance, where the priority obviously will be to fill the positions that have been vacated recently by the officials that have taken on the severance package, the voluntary severance package, and also to fill the positions in relations to the officials that have been identified to be placed abroad because they are leaving vacancy at head office and those positions have been budgeted for. But for the filling of the unfunded positions, unfortunately, at this stage, we still have to knock at National Treasury's door for more funding around that so that we can be able to deal with the 624 positions that are vacant in the department. Chair, the other issue that was raised was the issue of the 2% increase, which also, and then where we were asked, how are we going to prioritize the funding? Because as much as there is 2% increase, the 2% equates to inflation as well as other exchange rate fluctuations. So what we have done, Honorable Chair, firstly is to focus on agent and non-deferrable bilateral mechanism that will be chaired by the President, the Deputy President, our Minister, Deputy Ministers, to ensure an equitable geographic spread. So that is what we are looking at. And then what we have requested the department to do is to then look at the other senior officials meeting at a DG and DDG level to be held virtual. But I must indicate that it has been brought to our attention that virtual meetings for a department or for the services that this department renders doesn't work well because there are some issues that are of sensitive nature that cannot be discussed in virtual meeting, especially when these meetings are in preparation of the leaders' meetings. Then the other area that we are also prioritizing, Honorable Chair, we are prioritizing engagement and activities that are aligned with government economic policy priorities, focusing on those with immediate economic impact, which is trade and investment, which I believe our colleague or my colleague has indicated those matters when she was indicating the priorities of the department. The other issue that we are prioritizing, Honorable Chair, is it's our statutory meetings that are governed by international organizations like your UN, your AU, your SADC, your SALCU. But I must also, Honorable Chair, indicate that in this one, we still have a matter on the table that we are still in discussion with National Treasury, or that we are still to engage National Treasury on the funding of the SADC summit, which was not provided for by the National Treasury, which then suggests that the department must then reprioritize within the constrained resources to fund this SADC summit and also related meetings leading up to the SADC summit. So that is one area that we're really going to have problems as we're looking at. The last part that I want to raise as well as part of prioritizing our budget, Chairperson, we are also focusing on engagements where South Africa holds a significant role or where the meetings are geostrategic importance, like your BRICS meetings, like your G20 meetings, like your NEM and your CHOGAM. So these are the priorities that we have done as a department as we were looking at our constrained budget, how best we can deal with that. However, we could still do more should we be granted a budget as a department that will align with what is expected of this department to produce. Lastly, Chairperson, Honorable Chair, I would like to cover the issue of renovations of our properties abroad. Yes, it is a concern not just to the portfolio committee, also to the department, executive and management, because what you have seen as allocated to the department as 200 million around capital expenditure or capital asset, 174 million of that is going to be utilized for the renovation of properties. As big as it sounds, but I must indicate that it will only cover 3 major projects that we are looking at. One in Denmark, which is the official residence there, which is already constructed. We have already contracted a service provider, which is looking at 60 million. We also have replacement of the boiler system at the Chancery in our London office, which is sitting at about 69 million. And the third project that will be also squeezed in there is the renovation of the residential accommodation in London, 21 Cavendish Close, which is sitting at around about 30 million. So you could tell that of the 174 million, only 3 major projects could be accommodated, and the rest of the missions will have to then wait for their turns. But I must also indicate, Chair, that it's not like the department is not doing anything around that. We've been engaging National Treasury, and we are also in discussions with public and private entities. Chair, I would also like to highlight one more important thing that I think it will come out sharply in this financial year. The 200 million that is allocated to the department, of which 174 million will go to properties. We will still have to discuss as management, because we did not get any funding to finalize our ICT project. So that is one of the issues. Then we will have to discuss if we have to drop one of the renovations in the mission, so that we are able to finalize the ICT, since the funding was also not provided for. Thank you, DG, and thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, CFO. So we'll ask Ms. Sampo to deal with some of the ARF questions, including the questions on SATPA.
Okay. Thank you, DG, and thank you, honorable members. I will start with SATPA. The transition to SATPA remains important, and it's still a priority for the ARF. Where the process is that we have consulted National Treasury on the bill, and we have received the inputs. And what we are busy with now is seeking legal opinion on the draft bill, so that we can go back and submit it to Cabinet. And it remains important. The benefits of SATPA will be to create a fully fledged entity. And this will address one of the questions that was asked also on the objectivity and the governance structures. With SATPA, you're going to have a CEO who reports to the minister. And with that said, it will create structures in terms of governance, and it will also separate the roles and responsibilities between the department, which is DERCO, and that of SATPA. But however, in the meantime, as a risk for objectivity, how it's mitigated is that you have an advisory committee that is constituted by the members of DERCO, and there's also those representatives from National Treasury. Therefore, you are able to mitigate the issue objectivity in that space. There was also an issue on the vetting of the ARF Secretariat. Yes, the head of the ARF Secretariat is vetted. What now we are in a process of doing is that, because now we have capacity, which was also raised to say, do we have capacity? Yes. For the first time, the ARF has capacity. We have 3 managers that are reporting to the head, and we have also assistant managers and project officers. We have done this so that we can capacitate and be able to implement projects, and also be consistent in the mechanisms that we apply. Therefore, then the vetting will now also be scaled down to the project managers as the people who are responsible for the disbursements of funds. Then there was an issue with the poor performance that was related to our performance information. The honorable members will recall that this came out of previous AG reports and also our impact assessment. And we have since then developed an action plan to address those findings. And we have addressed the findings as a result from the 24-25 audit. We have managed to clear all our misstatements on performance information and our inconsistencies. Hence, when we presented program 1, we spoke about targets for oversight, targets for reporting, which are addressing those issues. And going into this audit as well, we are positive that we have applied all the due diligence processes to ensure that we can account and confirm the accuracy and the relevance of the projects that exist. Then there was an issue on sustainability. Sustainability it's still one of the issues that come, because with sustainability, it also have an impact on your financial resources. So what happens currently is that hence our approach now is saying we will implement humanitarian aid projects, but we want to match that with socio-economic development, which means instead of providing once-off food supplies, we might look into more of farming activities so that there's sustainability. But we are also acknowledging the risks and the limitation in terms of the financial resources in addressing the issue of sustainability. Then there was an issue on the impact. The humanitarian aid projects, based on the previous impact assessment and the impact assessment that we do quarterly, are rated high because impact takes into account your set outcome per project, the alignment to the objectives, verification of what was delivered against what was intended for, and also the number of beneficiaries. So we can confirm that at project management level, the impact is high, but as previously committed, we will be going through the next impact assessment for the next 3 years, which will also provide more of an objective view to the committee from an independent service provider who will come and assess and provide assurance on the impact that will come and be reporting quarterly on. And we have noted the comments from Honorable Mhlongo, particularly on humanitarian, which I've spoken to, but we have also noted the comments on the Cuba humanitarian aid. And I think when we come and report in the quarterly, in the new financial year, we'll be able to deliberate and unpack more of the activities that we are directing to Cuba in that space. And lastly, I think, is to touch on the financial model. I think Honorable Douglas raised an issue of saying our planned activities as compared to our available budget of 56 million might not be aligned. But the financial model of the ARF is that we go through annually a process to request retention of surplus. From the 25-26, our indicative costing shows that we might be going through that process for about 400 million to request to retain surplus. So should that be approved, then we have more funds which will top up the 56 million. Secondly, we also have an avenue to accrue interest on our investment from the banks. So that also on its own contributes and adds on that 56. So we are comfortable to say the planned target and milestones are aligned to the financial availability or the finances of the ARF and will be able to implement accordingly. Thank you, teacher.
Thank you very much. And we'll now ask Mr. Monyela just to touch briefly on some ICT issues.
Thank you very much, DG, and good afternoon to the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, Deputy Minister, and the team from DERCO. Chair, perhaps let me just start by mentioning that we recognize the feedback from the Portfolio Committee from the oversight visits that were done, and we have certainly taken on board the issues that have been raised. DERCO found itself in a very unique situation where the ICT infrastructure had been neglected for many years, number one. Number two, when decisions were taken in terms of the projects that needed to be undertaken, the cart was placed before the horse, in that the first project dealt with buying new machines, computers, laptops, before the actual infrastructure, as in the network, was attended to. What you then ended up is some of the observations that the portfolio committee has made in visiting the missions that you have visited. It's a situation that we expected, so it wasn't something that we were taken by surprise when it eventually happened, where there were network connectivity problems, laptops being slow because the network is slow, generally connectivity being a problem, and missions being unable to operate in certain instances, including issues of telephones. The update we can provide to the committee is that all of those issues have now been largely attended to, particularly at the missions that you have visited. We're at the tail end of ensuring that the network is where it should be in terms of speed and in terms of ensuring that the interruptions and downtimes at the missions are minimized. Number one. Number two, and I'm getting a little bit technical here, the memory, the RAMs of some of the machines needed to be upgraded, and that matter has been dealt with. As we speak now, we've got several teams that are out visiting missions, attending to this particular issue, including the issue of telephones, particularly on the continent. I mean, we've had cases in missions like Tunisia and other missions on the continent. So that particular aspect of the project is being rolled out. Where we are, honorable members, is that we will, I think the best would be to provide a written report with updates addressing the specific issues that you had previously identified, so that I limit my input to be very short, but just give you the assurance that all the issues related to connectivity and ICT that were experienced by the missions, one, have been attended to largely, and in areas where we haven't gotten to those missions, there's certainly a plan to get to those missions and address those issues. I want to also address the issue of automating certain aspects of the DERCO business from an ICT perspective. We've had to postpone several automation processes or projects owing to unavailability of funds. It's important to mention this. This is why it's in the APP, even for the current new financial year. And you would have seen this in the previous financial year. So this wasn't because we couldn't do it. It's purely an issue that finances were not available to do this. I think the CFO has already touched on sacrifices in certain areas of our business to fund activities related to ICT because simply we don't have the money. So I was quite heartened to hear inputs from honorable members, including Honorable Douglas, regarding how poorly DERCO is funded because it affects the extent to which we're able to execute the mandate of the department. He even touched on issues of public diplomacy not being adequately funded. We're confronted with many issues right now in the environment where we have to push back against misinformation and fake news, sometimes on an hourly basis. And we're stretched with minimal capacity to deal with some of these things. And in the absence of funding, you're not able to mount sustainable campaigns to continually push back. We're having to be very creative in utilizing free platforms like social media. And I must say, we've scored some successes in this regard. I mean, there was a time when the misinformation from certain capitals in North America was starting to gain traction. But we were able to push back and mobilize South Africans. Right now, when there is an issue that's clearly fake, incorrect and misinformation, South Africans themselves amplify the messaging of government in pushing back. That speaks to how effective the opinion pieces and the messaging that we've been putting out has been to also mobilize South Africans to join government in defending this country's standing in the world. Perhaps just to, in conclusion, say on the issue of capacity in the department, also encouraged by the input from honorable members, because we really are at a point where a lot of our officials are experiencing, burnout because they're carrying a lot of responsibilities that otherwise should be shared by several officials. And once again, I think continuing to knock on the door of National Treasury with the support of the Portfolio Committee would go a long way. So we do appreciate the support in that regard. Chair, I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Honorable Chair, Deputy Minister, back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, DG. Chairperson, over to you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Thank you very much. Honorable members, is there anybody who wants to do Pendam Zala? Rachika Papiri, Pendam Zala. Pendam Zala means, is there anyone who wants to ask any other question or clarity? Okay, we don't have anyone in the mood of doing Pendam Zala. We wish Orlando, no, not Orlando Pirates, Kaiser Chiefs and Mamelodi Sundowns. Tonight, there's a match in Pretoria where the two teams, it is glamour versus style. Tonight at 7:30 in Pretoria. So those who are in Pretoria, like the DM, I'm sure you're invited to the game. Represent us very well there. We are here in Cape Town. The weather, going to ask honorable members, all of us and South Africans who are on the platform, please take heed to the warnings about the weather. The weather now in South Africa is changing at an alarming rate. We must not undermine water that flows across the roads because it may not be raining where you are, but the slope might be such that the water comes from elsewhere where there's heavy rains, and you try and cross the low-lying bridges and you are swept away. Then the helicopters must move around or to look for you, or the crocodiles that have been struggling to have something to munch on will be munching on you. So we're just requesting South Africans, please, to take heed of the weather warnings. If all possible, avoid traveling at night so that by 4 or 5 o'clock at night, in the afternoon, we are all in our respective homes because of the challenges of infrastructure, particularly in our rural areas. The third point is the matter that was raised by Honorable Mhlongo about the IT infrastructure. We are still looking for a date, Honorable Mhlongo. We're disrupted by the holidays, also by us going on recess. Between now and the beginning of June, we will be dealing with budgets of various departments. So it will be difficult to deal with that particular matter between now and the end of May. And in June, we are on recess until mid-July. Somewhere there, if I'm not wrong. So as soon as we come back, and I'm urging DG Munyela, who is dealing with IT matters, to prepare for that period. As soon as we come back from recess, somewhere in August, we will then have a meeting with the department and possibly, if necessary at that stage, the service providers. According to DG Munyela, everything is honky-dory now, it's on track. So we will get that briefing physically in the interaction between us and the department. I did hear the response from the DG about key performance targets for for our missions. I think the DM must agree that that must be work in progress to refine in the broader scheme of things, microeconomic factors and so on, but to still refine the specific roles that every mission has to play before we speak about other departments that we need to collaborate with. Every mission has to have their own key targets to attain in as far as economic diplomacy is concerned. I know it's a new thing. It has not been done in the last 32 years. We've been working broadly, which is not wrong, but we are improving now because we have gained experience. Because when you look at South Africa's economy, and I hope one day Treasury can understand why we need to adopt that posture. Domestically, our growth is very, very shallow domestically. So if you are to look at the last 15 years, you will realize that the only time we came closer to 5.5 was between 1996 and 2000. So since then, we have not even come closer to 5% growth. According to projections of the economic experts, when we look at the next 10 years for South Africa's economic growth, it's not promising. It's not promising. And my view is that we will have to fiddle with some of the variables so that we can create a slightly positive outlook. 2026, 27, it is projected, actually until 2030, we are projected not to grow beyond 2%, right? Until 2030. Of course, part of our problem is that the debt level is rising alarmingly. And debt level by the state is unavoidable as long as the debt contributes to growth. So I fall in the category of philosophers who believe that the school of thought that believes that there's nothing wrong in the debt of the state as long as that debt that you take from the state is an amplifier in the economy, because it will do equalization. After equalization, it will lead to growth. So, National Treasury Deputy Minister has to be engaged about changing the trajectory in as far as allocating resources for foreign direct investment driven by DERCO is concerned. Because if we were to do permutations of every country that we are trading with, and we dig deeper into the new mechanics we must put in place to woo more investments into South Africa, we will realize that in the medium to long term, it will help South Africa a lot for us to invest in bringing investors here in South Africa and in improving on tourism, and then internally in South Africa, working on all types of infrastructure inside the country, so that you don't have visitors coming here or investors coming here, then there's no water reticulation somewhere in the country. So I hope heart-to-heart discussions must happen between DERCO and DTIC and Treasury for them to begin to realize that there's more we can do with money that comes from the outside to invest in South Africa. There's very little you can squeeze more from South Africans because the wages and salaries are very low. When unemployment is very high, you don't have people to pay tax, which the consequence is you don't have revenue sufficient to enable you to change the lives of people. And you don't have the resources to accelerate job creation, right? That's why we are tilting towards social wage in the country here. So I just hope and I pray, DM, that you will talk to Honorable Kotongwan and his bureaucrats to understand that if we create conducive conditions in the country for foreign investments to come into the country, that's how we are going to boost domestic economic injection and therefore growth. And then do everything possible to keep those investments here in the country for 30 to 50 years to 100 years. And then you grow the African continent region by region from the south. But if you are going to keep this status quo, the way it has been for the last 32 minus 5, there was growth of 5 years. For the last 27 years, because if you minus the period when South Africa was growing at about 5.4%, that was a period of about 6 years. If we don't do something extraordinary, we are going to have serious problems in the country. I hope that the discussions that are taking place with Nigeria, those discussions are also happening with Dangote. Dangote has got investment here in South Africa. He's producing cement in South Africa. One of the things he's producing. We have closed down our refineries. Minister Mantashe says they are rebuilding one, which is good, but we don't know how long it's going to take. So I will suggest the Deputy Minister that in your discussions with Nigeria, we must discuss the possibility of having a fuel storage located in strategic points in South Africa from Nigeria and elsewhere, but mainly from Dangote himself, because the vessels that are coming daily to deliver fuel in South Africa, it's clear now, based on what Trump is doing in the Strait of Hormuz, that thing is not sustainable. So if we have huge reserves of fuel, whatever happens in Strait of Hormuz will not affect us because we will have sufficient reserves of fuel and therefore cushion our people against these variables that are contributing to them losing a little bit of money that they have at their disposal through grants. So I'm just pleading, Deputy Minister, that you comrades who are in the executive, please engage about the possibility of a different trajectory. I'm not talking ideology, I'm just talking basic economics. A different trajectory that will put South Africa on a better path in as far as the economy is concerned. You know that if you have a huge reserves of fuel, for instance, just the certainty in the markets that you've got the fuel reserves in huge quantities. It stabilizes your trading, your currency. The fact that we've got surplus of energy like we have now, it does contribute that. Our balance of payments, whatever. If you work on those things, then we'll be okay. But I want to thank you, Deputy Minister, for leading the processes to come to the committee. Please remind the Minister that he committed to come physically to the committee once a quarter. So the first quarter is already lapsed. We are getting into the second quarter now, which means we will have to have him twice in the second quarter, coming to the portfolio committee physically himself. We know that his schedule is controlled by the presidency, but there are certain commitments that he must be able to indicate to the president that presidency, please know this year on this particular dates or in a month, when you schedule things and so on, just make sure that you try and avoid these dates because I've committed to the portfolio committee to appear before them physically. Please give that message to Minister Lamola so that we are loyal to the decisions that we have taken, all of us. I wish all of you luck this afternoon in the discussions that are going to take place from 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the dome. Some of them call it the Super Dome because that former premier was the first one to start the process that led to the manufacturing of the dome to bury Moses Kotane and J.B. Max in South Africa. So we are the inheritors of the efforts of those who preceded us. Thank you very much once more. Deputy Minister, your team, honorable members, as always, robust engagements. Our fellow South Africans who are following us on various platforms, we thank you for your ears to follow the proceedings of the portfolio committee. This is how we come to the end of today's meeting, honorable members. Samayansinke, Moilo, Ambani Kahle, Enkosi, Siyabonga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.